Hello everyone, you're watching CNN. I'm John Vos. It's just gone midnight here in Atlanta, Georgia, 10 p.m. in Phoenix, Arizona, 9 p.m. in Reno, Nevada. 3 states with Senate races still undecided and votes still being counted. And with Georgia now heading for a December runoff, the focus is now on 2 very close races in Arizona and Nevada. 2 states where an incumbent Democrat is trying to hold on to their seat in the U.S. Senate. At this hour, new vote tallies to report from both states. With 500,000 votes yet to be counted in Arizona, Democratic incumbent Mark Kelly expanding his lead over Republican challenger Blake Masters. Most of the votes being counted are from Maricopa County, Arizona's biggest county with about half of the state's total population, including the city of Phoenix. Kelly's campaign manager tells CNN they are confident and are expecting a win. In Nevada, new numbers show Democratic incumbent Catherine Cortez Masto closing the gap on Republican Adam Laxalt. There are still tens of thousands of ballots yet to be counted from Clark County, the biggest county in Nevada, which includes Las Vegas, and the state's only county which leads Democrat. Joining us now live from Reno, Nevada is Tabitha Mueller, political reporter for the Nevada Independent, and in Phoenix, Arizona, Mary Jo Pitzl with the Arizona Republic. Thanks to you both for being with us.
Thanks for having us on.
Okay, so with control of the Senate at stake here, the focus now on your states, and what is an incredibly slow process of counting votes. And over on Fox News, that's causing some unhappiness. Listen to this.
Arizona doesn't even start counting early votes until Election Day. They want the drama. They want delayed results. They designed it this way. They start with mail-in ballots, then they count day of ballots, and then they finally get around to drop-off ballots. Heaven forbid you count everything at the same time. That'd make too much sense.
So, Mary Jo Phoenix, to you, why is it taking this long in Arizona, and is it all because you want the drama?
Yeah, we love the drama. No, this happens every 2 years when we have statewide elections. It's just magnified this year because the races are, the top ones are so competitive and so close. The reason it takes time is that the majority of Arizonans mail in their ballots. Some of them they drop off at the polls on Election Day, but they all come in a sealed green envelope, the ballots inside of there. And it's not as simple as just opening the envelope and throwing the ballot into a counting machine. Elections officials have to verify that that ballot that came in the green envelope with the signature on the outside matches the signature on the voter registration rolls. That takes some time to do that. Then they might have some problems and then they'll reach out to the voter. So when you're dealing with, more than 2 million ballots, you really can't get that done in a day. It does take some time. They do this in the interest of accuracy. And I should note that from the clip you played, it is incorrect. Arizona does start counting early ballots early. They don't wait until Election Day.
Thank you. And Tabitha, to you, the count seems to be even slower in Nevada. So same question, why is that the case? And are there concerns that because it is taking so long, it does open the door to conspiracy theorists and election deniers that there was something untoward taking place?
The reason it's taking so long is because they want to verify that that the votes are correct, right? You have a lot of ballots that are being mailed in or dropped off. You have to open them. Sometimes those ballots have errors on them. Sometimes they need to verify signatures. It takes a little bit of time for the mail to come in. We had a county elections officials saying, look, this is going to take time, and it's because they want to get it right. It would be better to be accurate than just to rush results for the sake of rushing results. And as for people saying this is opening the state up to conspiracy theories, I think it's actually making sure that everything is verified and correct so that when or if those election deniers say, hey, we're going to sue you, all of the data is there and everything's checked.
Sometimes you can't win no matter what you do, I guess. But let's go to Arizona for a minute, because the Senate is looking to be likely Democrat win, but the race for governor remains very close. And for a while now, the Republican challenger, Kari Lake, has been casting doubt over the final outcome. Here she is on Election Day. I think. There you go.
We are going to monitor the ballots. We got to work in the system that we have right now. And as they continue to come in and our numbers go up, up, up like they did last time, when we win, first line of action is to restore honesty to Arizona elections.
Mary Jo, it's a bizarre sort of logic here. If she wins, the results are okay, but if there's any other result, it's dishonest. Has this sort of Trumpism in high heels actually cost her any support this time around?
Well, I think the very fact that as we speak, that the Democratic candidate, Katie Hobbs, is leading by a slender margin, like 1%, after not running a very good campaign, frankly, and being out of the spotlight a lot. I think the fact that the Democrat is still hanging on to a lead sort of speaks to why a lot of people aren't necessarily falling in love with, as you say, this Trump in heels. Her message is contradictory because it's okay if she wins, but if she loses, then there's problems. Well, it's got to be one or the other.
Yeah, you can't have a bet each way, it seems. Not in an election, you can all or nothing. And back to you, Tabitha, the votes continue to arrive by mail there in Nevada. There's still about 100,000 ballots yet to be counted. So is there an idea of which way those votes are breaking? And is that enough to give you an indication of who will ultimately take that Senate race?
We're still seeing results coming in, of course, and obviously nothing is certain until they come in. But we are seeing a lot of those results breaking for Democrats, right? I think earlier last night we were talking about how they were a margin of 2-1 roughly. And I'm not sure what that margin is off the top of my head right now, but we are seeing Democrats slowly gaining leads in this election. And there's still, I think, a pathway for Senator Catherine Cortez Masto to maintain her seat in the Senate. We'll just have to see what those votes say when they come in.
Tabitha there, Tabitha Mueller in Reno, Nevada, Mary Jo Pitzel there in Phoenix, Arizona. Thank you both for staying up late and being with us. We appreciate it. We know you've had long days of reporting so far. Some long days still to come. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Pleasure. So after Congress passed the biggest climate change bill in US history, President Biden expected to take something of a victory lap at this year's COP27 summit in Egypt. But before that, he was taking a victory lap at home over the results of the midterm elections, which he said were a good day for democracy and a strong night for Democrats. Well, control of Congress is still unclear. There was no Republican red wave, and for Biden, the focus now is to prevent Republicans from undoing Democratic accomplishments like the climate change bill. Here's CNN's Jerry Diamond reporting in from the White House.
Well, President Biden still riding high on Democrats, precedent-defying midterms showing on Tuesday, holding a rally with Democratic National Committee staffers. The president thanking them for their work on the campaign. But what he was really trying to do was to capitalize on the energy that has been buzzing in Democratic circles since that showing on Tuesday, and also trying to project strength. Despite what we saw, which appeared to be somewhat of a victory rally, Democrats, including those inside the White House behind me here, they certainly do acknowledge the very high likelihood that they will face a Republican majority in the House come January. And so that's part of why these optics were so important to the president and to his advisors as they were setting up these remarks. I'm told by a Biden advisor that the goal was to project strength and to show that this energy in the Democratic Party is very real as they prepare for this possibility of a Republican House. The president also in his remarks, he didn't acknowledge that that's going to happen, but you did hear him talk about how he is going to deal with Democrats.
If Republicans try to walk away from the historic commitment we just made to deal with the climate crisis, I will not let that happen. If Republicans try to cut Social Security and Medicare, I will not let that happen. And if they try to cut taxes for the super wealthy again, the biggest corporations like they did in the last administration, I will not let that happen either.
Now, when I asked the White House press secretary what specifically the president would be willing to compromise on with Republicans, she couldn't point to any specific issue areas. But clearly, what you see here is the White House setting the table for a prospect that they haven't experienced so far in President Biden's nearly 2 years in office, and that is divided government, power sharing. And we know that if there is indeed a Republican House, there will be a series of showdowns and standoffs, and the White House very much trying to position itself from a place of strength for those potential negotiations. Now, the president, he isn't giving up entirely on the possibility of Democrats winning the House before heading off on his trip to Egypt and Asia, saying that he believes that chances Democrats could still win the House are, quote, still alive. He said he'd have to pull an inside straight to make it happen, but again, he said it's still alive. Jeremy Diamond, CNN, the White House.
What was our mission? To win the majority, to stop Biden's agenda and fire Nancy Pelosi. All of that is accomplished.
So what is it with Republicans and mission accomplished? That was the current minority leader in the lower house, Republican Kevin McCarthy, spinning the outcome of the midterm elections. And yes, the GOP is on track to win control of the House. It will not be with a majority of 20 or 30 seats, which they predicted, but likely fewer than 5. And yes, Nancy Pelosi will not be Speaker of the House come January, but because of the Republicans' poor showing at the midterms, it's far from certain that Kevin McCarthy will get the job. CNN's Manu Raju has the latest.
Now, Kevin McCarthy is confident that he ultimately will get the votes to become the next Speaker of the House, but he is not there yet. First, it is not certain that they will get back the House majority, although it does appear that the Republicans are on track to at least get a narrow majority that has not been called yet. But more significantly, the margin is expected to be tight. And if it is tight, that means that he cannot afford to lose more than a handful of votes when it comes time in January to elect the next House Speaker. And already, several members of the House Freedom Caucus, that is that hard-right faction, are threatening to vote against him, are saying that they want more commitments from him and some concessions before they agree to support him. Among the things they are asking for is to have more leverage over him, to ensure that they have the ability to call for a vote on the House floor to essentially oust him from his position as Speaker. That is something that McCarthy does not want to give them. They also want more opportunity to review legislation as well as better committee assignments. Some are pushing for McCarthy to make some assurances or at least be open to the idea of launching impeachment proceedings against either Joe Biden or some of his cabinet secretaries. Now, over the last day, there have been meetings with the House Freedom Caucus to strategize about their decisions and their tactics going forward. And out of those meetings, many of the members indicated they still have not made a decision. One member, Bob Good of Virginia, indicated that there would be a challenger to McCarthy, and that challenger would have a long shot at bid to knock off the Republican leader from ascending to the speakership, but it could force him to come to the bargaining table. Now, McCarthy indicated that he is open to talking to some of these members and he's open to having meetings, and he told Fox News on Thursday evening that he does have the votes to become Speaker. He downplayed the idea that perhaps he will not ultimately get there. And in talking to McCarthy allies and aides, they're confident that ultimately McCarthy will become the next Speaker of the House. But the narrow majority will only complicate things for him as he tries to move through an agenda uniting both the conservatives on his right and as well as those moderate members and ones who won from districts that Joe Biden carried to determine whether or not he can get legislation through. That will be a heavy lift. Manu Raju, CNN, Capitol Hill.
Later this hour, let the Senate runoff in Georgia begin.
He hung around and got into this runoff, and he thinking he's going to win. We need to prove him wrong and let him get out of that office.
And open the money taps as both parties ramp up their spending bigly. Also ahead, a live report from the Climate Change Summit in Egypt. First stop on President Biden's three-nation tour. Welcome back. Right now, US President Joe Biden is heading for Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, departing from the Joint Base Andrews late Thursday. In the coming hours, he'll deliver remarks at the COP27 climate conference. He'll also meet with Egypt's president. Biden is expected to call on nations to, quote, keep their eyes on the ball when it comes to reducing global emissions. He'll also focus on increased spending by the United States on renewable energy, part of stepped-up commitments to reduce the impact of climate change. CNN White House reporter Kevin Liptak is there in Sharm el-Sheikh. He joins us now live. And Biden arrives at Sharm el-Sheikh, I guess, with a very good story to tell, accomplishments which have been made by his administration that weren't there in previous years.
Yeah, certainly the president does believe he's arriving here in Egypt with the wind at his back. And you heard the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, say yesterday that the president believes the results from this midterm election really put him in a position of strength as he embarks on this trip. And of course, his goal here, just as his goal on all of his trips abroad, is really to tell foreign leaders that America is back, that it remains committed to all of its global allies and alliances and to subjects like climate change. And the president does have some backing to those commitments when he arrives here. He will walk into this summit having passed the most significant investment towards combating climate change in American history, some $370 billion that were included in the Inflation Reduction Act. The president also planning to talk about a new proposed rule that would require federal contractors to submit their own carbon reduction plans. Also some initiatives towards cutting methane. And so the president does hope to use those items as leverage to convince other world leaders to make their own similarly ambitious commitments towards cutting carbon, towards cutting greenhouse gases, and sort of getting all on the same page as they try and limit the effects of global warming. And what one White House official says is that they want the president to tell these other leaders to keep their eye on the ball and to stay focused on the specific issue of reducing emissions. But it's sort of interesting because there are a lot of leaders who are focused on another issue at this summit, which is the issue of climate reparations. They essentially want wealthy countries to pay poorer countries to help build resilience. That's not something that seems politically tenable at the moment. So when you hear the president speak later today, he will really call on leaders to stay focused on this issue of emissions when he speaks here in Sharm later. John.
Kevin, thank you. Kevin Lipchak live for us there in Sharm el-Sheikh. We appreciate the update. The COP27 summit is part of a week-long trip that will take President Biden to several major summits. From Egypt, he heads to Phnom Penh in Cambodia for the ASEAN summit on Saturday and Sunday. Then it's on to Bali, Indonesia, for the G20 summit. And there, he is set to meet with the Chinese leader Xi Jinping on the sidelines. The first time the two have met in person since Joe Biden became US president. Stephen Jiang joins us live from Beijing with more on this. So this will be an interesting meeting. Xi Jinping and Donald Trump certainly had their own dynamic going. What is expected when Xi Jinping meets Joe Biden?
Well, John, I think the prospect of this so-called world's most important bilateral relationship is as gloomy as Beijing's weather today. That is something actually even acknowledged by U.S. officials. Ahead of this meeting, a senior Biden administration official told reporters on Thursday there's not going to be a joint statement after this meeting, and they're not expecting any so-called deliverables, and there might not even be any significant easing of tensions after this meeting. Now, the reason is quite clear, but she insists that this meeting is all about building rapport between the two men and building the floor in this relationship. But the problem here is the rapport doesn't seem to be the problem. The two men obviously have known each other for years, spending a lot of time together as vice presidents, and they have talked 5 times on the phone via video link since Biden took office, and each time they always reminisced about the good old times. But the problem here is really the fundamental differences between the two governments, how they see themselves and how they see the other. That's been driving them apart. Now, from Washington's perspective, China under Xi Jinping has grown increasingly authoritarian at home and increasingly assertive and even aggressive abroad. That's why Biden plans to raise the issue of human rights abuses. For example, Beijing's crackdown on the Uyghur Muslim minority in Xinjiang, but also the issue of Taiwan, of course. But from Beijing's perspective, of course, under Biden, the U.S. and its allies are increasingly to contain China's rise, to contain China's rightful place on the global stage. Biden not only has kept most of the Trump-era U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports, he has been ramping up restrictions on technology exports to China, including crucial semiconductors. So that's why, Xi Jinping has really made no secret of reshaping this world order led by the U.S. And not to mention, both men face a lot of domestic problems. Xi Jinping, under growing pressure on the economy because of zero COVID policy. So whipping up nationalism, always part of the playbook. So that's why, John, the stakes are so high, expectations are very low. John.
Yeah, just for the record, it's 1:23 in the afternoon there in Beijing. It looks awful behind you. That's not weather, that's pollution. Stephen, thank you. Bureau Chief there in Beijing. Thank you. Ukrainian troops continue to close in on the city of Kherson slowly and with caution. But they were given a hero's welcome from local residents on Thursday after reportedly liberating more than 40 settlements in the south. These images appear to show destroyed military hardware that the Russians left behind. The US top general says there are signs that Russia has started a withdrawal from Kherson, but Ukrainian officials warn Moscow may turn Kherson into, quote, a city of death by booby-trapping whatever it can and shelling Ukrainians as they move in. The White House is taking a wait-and-see approach.
First, this is a significant military milestone for the Ukrainians if, in fact, it happens that Russia follows through and withdraws to the far side of the Dnieper River. Of course, we're going to watch actions and not just announcements to see what actually unfolds.
Ukraine will soon receive more air defences to combat drone attacks, part of a new $400 million US aid package. It includes 4 Avenger air defence systems, which can shoot down helicopters and drones, as well as Hawk missiles and other ammunition. In total, the US has provided $18.6 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since the war began. CNN reported this week the US has been urging Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to signal he's still open to talks with Russia. That's because Washington is concerned the international support for Ukraine could wane if this war drags on for much longer. CNN's Christiane Amanpour sat down for an exclusive interview with Mr. Zelensky and Ukraine's First Lady, Olena Zelenska. Here's part of their conversation about possible talks with Russia.
Do you still stand by what you said a few months ago, that you would not negotiate with Vladimir Putin?
His proposal has no substance as regards ending the war. Other than ultimatums, I've not heard anything from the current president of the Russian Federation. Starting from the 24th of February, there have been only ultimatums: denazification, denationalization. Every issue they raise starts with a D. They always want to deprive us of something violently on our own land. So I said that I'm not going to talk to this person if this person conducts these sham referendums and recognizes all those sham authorities that they set up as legal. We said this clearly, and I said that if they do that, then this means they don't respect our people, our sovereignty, our rights and our freedoms. What is there to talk to them about? But I haven't closed the door. I said we would be ready to talk to Russia, but with a different Russia, one that is truly ready for peace.
I'm going to ask you this because you went not so many months ago to the Congress, actually. You also met with President Biden, you met with the First Lady, and you actually said, we need weapons, send us the weapons. Do you feel that you have the weapons now to actually win? Do you feel that NATO is here to help you win or just to stop you losing?
I think the president knows better how much more we need. I'm sure we need much more. But as a citizen of Ukraine, as a mother and a wife, I can feel that we need it. Because the missiles keep coming. When they stop coming, when our people stop dying in their beds in the morning, I will feel, okay, maybe that's enough. But we can't wait for Russians to run out of their supplies. It would be wonderful for them to run out, but I guess that's fantasy.
President Zelensky told CNN he will know when Russia is serious about peace talks. For that, stay tuned for more of our exclusive interview next hour. In the meantime, we'll take a short break. When we come back, control of the US Senate remains in limbo with 3 pivotal races up for grabs. We'll have the very latest from Arizona, where hundreds of thousands of ballots are yet to be counted. Minutes past the hour. Welcome back to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm John Vos. 3 days after the midterm elections, hundreds of thousands of ballots are still being counted at this hour in 2 key western states, Arizona and Nevada. The outcomes, along with a runoff in Georgia, will decide the future of the US Senate. Election officials say counting is underway as quickly as possible. Final results, though, are not expected until next week. With Arizona's race for governor still too close to call, Republican candidate Kari Lake publicly accusing, without any evidence, election officials of deliberately slowing down the vote count. CNN's Kyung La has the latest now from Phoenix.
Here in Maricopa County, the tedious work of democracy continues. Counting the vote, hanging in the balance is control of the U.S. Senate. Some 78,000 vote results were released this evening by Maricopa County. Didn't really change the races all that much percentage-wise, but the Democrats, who are currently on a razor-thin lead, they got just a bit more vote pad. Now, this is a slow process, and it is a careful process. What we're hearing, though, on the edges are some of the Republicans on this ballot who are frustrated, have been talking about some of these election officials might be doing this on purpose, releasing this slowly on purpose. And we got strong pushback by election officials here.
Quite frankly, it is offensive for Kari Lake to say that these people behind me are slow rolling this when they're working 14 to 18 hours. So I really hope this is the end of that now. We can be patient and respect the results when they come out.
The count continues. The election is not over in Maricopa County. Election officials are looking to start to zoom in on some of those election day ballots. Kyung La, CNN, Phoenix, Arizona.
Anti-government protesters in Iran are getting some star power backing from a popular Iranian actress who defied the morality police. When we come back, details on who she is and what she's doing. Anti-government protesters in Iran have received a boost from an Iranian actress who starred in an Academy Award movie, The Salesman. CNN's Jumana Kadashay has details on who she is and what she did in protest.
One prominent Iranian activist outside Iran described this bold move by actress Tarana Ali Dosti as a cultural earthquake. The actress, with a following of nearly 8 million people on Instagram, very popular, very famous in Iran for the role she played in the Oscar-winning film, the Iranian film The Salesman, shocked so many around the world by posting a photo of herself while still inside Iran with without her mandatory headscarf, the hijab, and holding up a sign with the Kurdish words Jinjan Azadi, which translates into women, life, freedom, what has become the slogan of the protests, the women's movement, and what has become this national uprising in Iran. Ali Dosti has also been known for speaking out, criticizing the regime. She is a human rights and women's rights defender. In recent days, she's also posted on social media saying that she is not going to leave her homeland, that she is going to stay in Iran, that she is going to defend those behind bars and the families of those who have been killed. And she said she is ready to pay a price for that. Now, we don't know if there's been any consequences after she posted this photo, but she is the latest in a series of high-profile figures in the country who have been speaking out, showing their support, showing solidarity with the protesters, something that is probably very embarrassing for the Iranian regime that for nearly 2 months now has been really pushing this narrative that the protests in this country, are a foreign conspiracy, a foreign plot that is aimed at destabilizing the country, that this is not a people's movement. Jumana Kadashay, CNN, London.
I'm John Vos. For our viewers here in the United States, please stay with us for continued election coverage. But for our international viewers, World Sport is up next. Welcome back. 15 minutes before the top of the hour, and the money taps have been turned on with millions of dollars about to be spent in Georgia's Senate runoff election. Democrats plan to spend at least $7 million campaigning for incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock. Republican Herschel Walker's campaign received $1 million donation from one group opposing abortion rights. Another $2 million came from the Senate Minority Leader's Super PAC. On Thursday, both men hit the campaign trail.
I came really to ask you one question. Are you ready to do this one more time? I did warn y'all that we might be spending Thanksgiving together. And And here we are.
You got to get out and vote because, you know, he hung around and got into this runoff, and he thinking he's going to win. We need to prove him wrong and let him get out of that office.
For the very latest, here's CNN's Nick Valencia reporting in from Canton, Georgia.
Thursday was the start of what will no doubt be a very long 4 weeks for Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. The Republican challenger Herschel Walker kicked off his runoff campaigning here in Canton, Georgia, in front of a very sizable crowd alongside Republican Senator Ted Cruz, the first in what will likely be a cavalry of Republican leaders to come down here to the southern state over the next 4 weeks to help Walker with his runoff race. Addressing a crowd, a very sizable crowd here in a deeply red part of the state, a source close to the Walker campaign tells me that it is part of Walker's strategy to get out the vote and focus on red counties where they underperform compared to Republican incumbent Governor Brian Kemp, who was able to win his midterm election outright and avoid a runoff. At the rally, both Cruz and Walker boldly predicted a win during the runoff. We were also able to catch up with Cruz afterwards and ask him if he thought it was a good idea for Walker to invite former President Donald Trump to campaign alongside him as well.
Herschel's made clear he will welcome the support from President Trump, who's supporting him. He said he would welcome the support of Ron DeSantis. He'll welcome the support of anyone coming to campaign.
Meanwhile, Democratic incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock also kicked off his runoff campaigning just a couple blocks away from Ebenezer Baptist Church. Standing in front of a mural of the famed civil rights icon John Lewis, Warnock appeared to make a plea to those who may not have voted for him in the midterm.
And for those of you who made a different choice this time, whether for Herschel Walker or someone else, I want to speak directly to you. Over the next 4 weeks, I hope you will give me the opportunity to earn your vote.
But just how important will Georgia be in controlling the Senate? We won't know that until the races in Arizona and Nevada are wrapped up. But one thing is clear, for the second consecutive election cycle, Georgians find themselves right in the middle of the center of the political universe. Nick Valencia, CNN, Canton, Georgia.
To Washington now, Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections. Thank you for being with us. We know it's late.
No problem. I was in my basement anyway in a suit, so I'm glad you called.
That worked out well. Very quickly, before we get into the sort of the whole big picture here, is it really much of an advantage to have Senator Ted Cruz come and campaign for you?
I don't think there are very many voters in Georgia who are waiting around. They're on the fence, not sure what to do, but waiting for Senator Cruz to tell them what to do. I mean, if it in a close race, everything could matter, and so if it does inspire some voters to turn out, but I think this is probably more about Ted Cruz than it is about Herschel Walker.
Seems it's always about Ted Cruz in some way. Okay, let's look at the big picture here, because a month before the elections, I think you had the Republicans gaining between 8 and 20 seats in the lower house. So that was a month out, right? So fair enough, it was a long-range forecast. What changed between then and Election Day?
Well, what happened, the surprise on election night was not in individual races, it's that the toss-up races broke disproportionately for the Democrats. It looked like heading into Election Day that Republicans were going to do well with independent, undecided voters who didn't like the job President Biden was doing. They were prioritizing the economy over abortion access and other issues. But in the end, independent voters actually broke slightly for Democratic candidates and those independents either didn't punish Democrats for what they don't like about Joe Biden, or they were uncomfortable voting for Republican candidates. So the surprise were those toss-up races. And now the fight for the House is not over. There is still a narrow path for Democrats to maintain control, which is not something I think really anyone envisioned 6 or 12 months ago.
Yeah, Democrats did very well on a national level in terms of defying traditional trends. What hasn't been talked about a lot is that Democrats did really, really well in state houses across the country, especially in like Michigan, Maryland, Minnesota, Massachusetts. They all start with M for some reason.
Right, and picked up the Pennsylvania State House as well. I mean, so this is a trend that we're not just seeing at the federal level, right? That there was something larger going on. Part of it had to do with candidate quality, where Republicans in some key races, some key governor's races, didn't nominate candidates that were acceptable alternatives for voters who want change. That's what's remarkable about the cycle, is that voters were primed for change. There's uncertainty with the economy or unrest with gas prices or the cost of living, but Republicans just couldn't close the deal or make the argument that they were ready to take control. And it looks like Democrats are going to hold the Senate and very narrowly miss keeping the House.
Just how important will those wins be at a state level, with this country now facing divided government in Washington, likely congressional gridlock for the next 2 years?
The state level could be huge because there isn't likely to get anything big done in Washington. You're going to have very narrow majorities in Congress, and even if one party controls both chambers, they have to get everyone on their own party on the same page. But you also could have a Republican Congress, part of a Republican Congress, and a Democratic president. Those are not the ingredients for major things. So it's going to fall to the state level in governors and state houses, where some of the major policy issues could take place over the next 2 years.
And very quickly, some of those policy issues that were voted on were all related to climate change and taking action on climate change. So it was very sort of a green wave, if you like, at the state level.
I mean, it depends on which state and which party is in control. But I think when we're talking about, we could be talking about climate change, but also do Republicans try to address economic issues or economic concerns, and Democrats as well. And abortion access is going to continue to be an issue post-Dobbs. And so the states are really where the thing to watch when Washington, if nothing's going to get done.
Yeah, the states have, the Democrats have the states, which is, really reversed a trend which has been happening for some time in those state houses races around the country. Nathan, thank you for staying up late. Back to the basement. We appreciate you being with us.
See you next time, John.
Thank you. Well, the US will have a record number of female governors in 2023. Tuesday's elections, Arkansas with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Massachusetts with Maura Healey, they elected their first female governors. As a result, 12 women will hold the top state spots across the country. That includes 2 races where CNN has not projected a winner, but all the candidates are female. Still, the record-setting number will represent a fraction of governors across all 50 states. The old record of 9 female governors serving concurrently was set in 2004. Well, these 2 people have died because of Hurricane Nicole. What was Hurricane Nicole? The powerful storm made landfall early Thursday along Florida's east coast. Dozens of beachfront homes and hotels have been declared unsafe in the wake of the storm. Images from a dorm room at a college in St. Augustine, Florida, show streets flooded after the hurricane hit. Student Cameron Kraft told CNN the water was about waist deep. Nicole has now weakened to a tropical depression, but expected to produce significant rainfall as it heads north. Close to 1 million people across the US are under a winter threat, including blizzard warnings. Some areas could see a foot of snow. The latest now from CNN meteorologist Derek Van Dam. It's snowing in parts, but it's 70 degrees here in Georgia, 70 degrees in Chicago. It's nuts.
It's hard to believe we're talking about a blizzard and a tropical storm all at the same time. And believe it or not, John, and for our people watching at home, these storms are going to kind of merge together, do a little dance over the next 24 hours, and they're going to greatly impact the eastern seaboard of the country. That means travel headaches, travel nightmares for many people will continue. Let me explain. Here's a look at the 1 million people under the blizzard and winter weather alerts, I should say. This is really the upper Midwest. You can see North Dakota into Minnesota, winter weather advisories. These are quickly starting to be eliminated or run out. The storm system is winding down relatively quickly, just a little bit of light snow left over across northwestern Minnesota. There is significant wind behind this system, so that's creating or prompting the National Weather Service for those blizzard warnings that are still in effect through Friday morning. But we zoom into the southeastern United States. Here's Tropical Depression Nicole drawing in moisture off the Atlantic seaboard. And look at this. It's also spinning up a few tornadoes across South Carolina and into North Carolina. And I talked about these 2 storm systems merging together. Well, look at the copious amounts of precipitation expected over the next 2 days over the eastern seaboard. The blizzard, or the low pressure and cold front that you saw just a moment ago, creating the winter weather across the northern plains, that is going to merge with the moisture from the remnants of what was Nicole, and that is going to produce a significant amount of rainfall, especially from the I-95 corridor to the west, and a lot of wind will be also included within this forecast for much of the eastern third of the country. Just look how these 2 kind of merge together. There's the cold front responsible for the blizzard and snow, wintry weather to the north and west, and that is, again, the remnants of what was Nicole. They're going to pick up, kind of absorb into each other, produce a significant amount of rain, and then just as quickly as it enters, it exits because it sweeps off east of the country as we head into the second half of the weekend. But in the meantime, Weather Prediction Center has a slight risk of flash flooding. This includes places like Roanoke, Charleston, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, the Central Appalachians. This area greatly prone to some of that localized flash flooding, especially when those rainfall totals exceed 4 inches, which they could possibly do, especially with the remnants of this tropical system moving through. There is a lot of wind associated with it. This could bring down some branches, some smaller trees across the Carolinas and into the Appalachians, as well as northern and central Georgia. You can see the storm system just winding up on itself. Lots of precipitation. So if you're traveling this weekend, specifically today into Saturday, D.C., New York, Boston, Syracuse, all the way to Pittsburgh, as well as Columbus and Cincinnati, it is, you want to double check your flight. You'll want to add extra time because things are going to get a bit messy out there. John?
Derek, thank you. Not since Hurricane Sandy has there been a hurricane and a winter storm at the same time. So how about that?
You know your weather.
I was checking on the Google machine. Thanks, Derek. I'm John Voss. Please stay with us. I'll be back with more of our special coverage of the midterm elections in just a moment. Hello, everyone. Great to have you with us here on CNN. I'm John Voss. It's 1 a.m. here in Atlanta, Georgia, 11 p.m. in Phoenix, Arizona, 10 p.m. in Reno, Nevada. 3 states with Senate races still undecided and votes still being counted. And with Georgia now heading for a December runoff, the focus is on 2 very close races in Arizona and Nevada, 2 states where incumbent Democrats are trying to hold on to their seats in the U.S. Senate. Let's take a look at the latest updates. With 500,000 votes yet to be counted in Arizona, Democratic incumbent Mark Kelly expanding his lead over Republican challenger Blake Masters. Most of the votes are being counted from Maricopa County, Arizona's biggest county, with about half of the state's total population. That includes the city of Phoenix. Kelly's campaign manager has told CNN they are confident and expect to win. In Nevada, new numbers show Democratic incumbent Catherine Cortez Masto closing the gap on her Republican challenger Adam Laxalt. There are still tens of thousands of ballots yet to be counted from Clark County, the biggest county in the state, which includes Las Vegas, and the state's only county which leans Democrat. CNN's Gary Tuchman has the very latest reporting in from Las Vegas, Nevada. But first, here's CNN's Kyung La in Phoenix, Arizona.
Here in Maricopa County, the tedious work of democracy continues. Counting the vote, hanging in the balance is control of the U.S. Senate. Some 78,000 vote results were released this evening by Maricopa County. Didn't really change the races all that much percentage-wise, but the Democrats, who are currently on a razor-thin lead, they got just a bit more vote pad. Now, this is a slow process, and it is a careful process. What we're hearing, though, on the edges are some of the Republicans on this ballot who are frustrated, have been talking about some of these election officials might be doing this on purpose, releasing this slowly on purpose. And we got strong pushback by election officials here.
Quite frankly, it is offensive for Kari Lake to say that these people behind me are slow rolling this when they're working 14 to 18 hours. So I really hope this is the end of that now. We can be patient and respect the results when they come out.
The count continues. The election is not over in Maricopa County. Election officials are looking to start to zoom in on some of those election day ballots. Kyung La, CNN, Phoenix, Arizona.
Here in the largest county in the state of Nevada, Clark County, at the Clark County Election Center, we can tell you that the tabulators are done tabulating for the evening. They will resume on Friday. In these 17 counties in the state of Nevada, the Democratic candidate for Senate, who is an incumbent, the Democratic candidate for governor, who is an incumbent, are making up ground with the counting of mail-in ballots. Tens of thousands of ballots still need to be counted in the state of Nevada. But right now, Catherine Cortez Masto, the Democratic senator, has made up about 7,000 votes today and is now behind her Republican challenger by 8,000 votes. Meanwhile, Governor Steve Sisolak has made up about 7,000 votes and is behind by 27,000 votes. So here in Clark County alone, the largest county in the state, there are at least 50,000 ballots still to count. These are not ballots that were done in person on Election Day. These are ballots that were mailed in or dropped in drop boxes on Election Day. Now, the ballots can come until Saturday. That's the rule here in Nevada. So either way, they would have been counting. They're not counting because it's close. They're counting because that's the law. As long as the ballots are postmarked by Tuesday, they could arrive by Saturday and be counted. So this will continue until at least Saturday. The counting will continue until Saturday, and we still don't know who the winners of these very high-profile races will be. This is Gary Tuckman, CNN in Las Vegas.
Even with some key races yet to be decided, the Biden White House is breathing easy after an expected Republican blowout never happened. US President Joe Biden says Tuesday's election was the first crucial test of democracy since the January 6th insurrection. Speaking to Democratic campaign workers Thursday, Biden also warned of the ongoing threat posed by Republican election deniers.
Thank you for fighting like the devil to make sure that we had a free and a fair election. And you know, all those election deniers, so far, best of my knowledge, none of them has not said, when they lost, they said, we lost. That's a big deal. No, I really mean it. You know, Tuesday was a good day for America, a good day for democracy, and it was a strong night for Democrats.
Standing by for us this hour in New York is Ron Brownstein, CNN's senior political analyst and senior editor for The Atlantic. Thanks for being with us, Ron. I know you've had a long couple of days.
Yeah, John, what a week.
What a week. And it's not over yet. Let's look at the turnout on Tuesday, because Republican voters outnumbered Democrat voters by a significant number. Now, at the same time, a CNN exit poll found that in the House, 49% of independent voters went for a Democrat candidate, while 47% went for a Republican. And according to David Shaw from the Blue Rose Research Group, Democrats won independent voters, which may be the first time that a party that controlled the presidency has won independents in a midterm since 2002. They got a lot of self-identified Republicans to vote for them, that's the Democrats, and they did these things especially well in close races. That's the how Democrats managed to defy the odds. But what about the why? Why did independents go for Democrats over Republicans?
Yeah, look, you know, I described this in October as a double negative election. As we saw in the exit poll, a majority of voters disapprove of the way Joe Biden is handling the presidency. You have an incredible number, 75 or 80%, saying the economy is only fair or poor. Large numbers, as you know, in the exit poll, saying that inflation has been a moderate or severe hardship on them. And historically, those are the kinds of numbers that produce, you know, a rout for the party holding the White House, particularly among those independent voters. But there was a second negative judgment that bounded and limited the impact of the first, which is that many of those same voters have deep concerns about the Republican Party in the Trump era. And what Democrats were able to do was focus just enough voters, not only on the question of what Democrats had done with power, but on the question of what Republicans would do with power. And I think the reluctance to give Republicans unified control, symbolized and crystallized by the issue of abortion and also about democracy, is what allowed Democrats to really avoid the worst in this midterm, especially given those underlying economic attitudes and attitudes about Biden.
Yeah, as for American democracy, let's go to that, because the nonpartisan States United Action reporting a bad night for candidates who ran on a platform refusing to recognise the legitimacy of the 2020 vote. They report election denialism has failed to gain new ground in most of the statewide races which have already been called. It seems the status quo then will remain. That's not a loss for American democracy, but is it a win?
You know, I would say no. I would say the threat is still there. I mean, because what we have seen happen since 2020 is the kind of germ of election denial has spread through the Republican Party. I mean, the idea that it will now go away if and when Trump ever does, you know, seems very naive. Can you? I mean, if in Arizona the final outcome is Kari Lake losing by a few thousand votes, which is possible. I mean, that's probably going to be decided by a few thousand either way. If she loses by a few thousand votes, does anybody think she just walks away?
That brings us to Donald Trump. A lot of speculation now over his hold on the Republican Party. Trumpity Dumpity was the headline on the front page of the Murdoch-owned, traditionally Trump-friendly New York Post. Sign perhaps that maybe the Republican establishment is turning on Trump. This is a Republican Party which stood by him despite the January 6th uprising, despite his attempts to overturn a legitimate election, despite the harm he has done to democratic values, despite the discovery of hundreds of classified documents at Trump's home. I mean, this list goes on, but if Trump becomes an election liability, that's what finally did it?
His electoral superpower is turning out low propensity white voters, right? I mean, there's no question that he brought in a lot of non-college, non-urban voters who had not previously been regular participants. And Republicans have always wanted the best of both worlds. They have wanted to benefit from that without necessarily alienating the suburban voters who continue, by the way, in Tuesday's results to recoil from Trump. So, now I think you will see more of a desire for an alternative, but it's not simple, John. And something that viewers around the world need to understand is that the rules by which Republicans pick a presidential nominee are very different than the rules by which a Democrat picks a presidential nominee. The Republican rules really advantage whoever has the single largest block of support, even if that's less than a majority. It has many more winner-take-all features. So even if there's a 55 or 58% majority of Republican voters who don't want Trump again, if he can hold 40 to 42 to 44, that is going to make it very hard for anyone else to get past him. I would just parenthetically note that in 2016, he had become the presumptive nominee, pulling away from the field before he reached 50% of the vote in any state. And that is something that could happen again unless the party consolidates more quickly than it did in 2016 behind a single alternative to Trump.
Yeah, 2 years until then. We'll see what happens, a year or so until we get to that point. Ron, it's coming up soon. Thanks for being with us. You're watching CNN, and there is a lot more to come, including a live report from the Climate Change Summit in Egypt, the first stop on the US President's three-nation tour. Also ahead, the Ukrainian flag flying high over once occupied and liberated territory, liberated by a Ukrainian offensive, which is inching closer to the city of Kherson. Welcome back, everyone. US President Joe Biden, they're heading for Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, departing from Joint Base Andrews late Thursday. In the coming hours, he'll deliver remarks at the COP27 climate conference. He'll also meet with Egypt's president. Biden is expected to call for nations to, quote, keep their eyes on the ball when it comes to reducing global emissions. He'll also focus on increased spending by the US on renewable energy, part of a stepped-up commitment to reduce the impact of climate change. CNN White House reporter Kevin Liptak is there in Sharm el-Sheikh waiting for the president. He joins us now live. So just a year ago, COP26 in Glasgow, Biden turned up empty-handed, received a lot of criticism for that. Not this time.
Yeah, he walked into that summit in Scotland just as his proposed climate plan was totally falling apart. Republicans opposed it. There were key Democrats that were holdouts. And it is interesting how much difference a year has made. Eventually, that bill passed. It was sort of a slog for the president, but it did include $370 billion to combat climate change. That was the largest investment in American history. And the president certainly does feel like he's entering this conference now, a year later, having put his money where his mouth is when it comes to sort of goading other nations into making their own significantly ambitious climate pledges. And White House officials say that he does plan to try and leverage those commitments when he speaks later today in Sharm el-Sheikh to try and tell leaders that now is the time for their own countries to step up, for their own countries to make very, very significant investments to try and curb global warming. The president does feel like he has his wind at his back when he's coming into this summit and onto the rest of the trip, in part because of the midterm elections, which seemed as if they were a referendum on his choices over the last year. And so the president does feel pretty good. What White House officials say that he'll say in his remarks is that other leaders need to keep their eye on the ball when it comes to curbing greenhouse gases and stay focused on this specific issue. One issue that he will confront here is that a lot of leaders are focused on a different issue, which is the issue of climate reparations. Basically, some poorer countries who are being adversely affected by climate change are asking for wealthier nations who are the largest emitters of greenhouse gases to pay up, to essentially pay them to help build resilience for issues like floods, fires, other extreme events that are directly related to climate change. What the president's dilemma is that there really is no support for that politically, particularly if Republicans take control of the Congress. And that is sort of the issue, the dynamic that the president has as he embarks on this round-the-world 7-day trip. Certainly the president will tell these leaders, as he does everywhere around the world, that America is back, that it's renewing its commitments to allies, to things like democracy and climate change. And certainly the biggest threat to that is President Trump, and he does appear politically weakened. But at the same time, if Republicans take control of one or more chambers of the Congress, the president's agenda will be severely curbed. So those are the two things that the president is balancing as he arrives here in a few hours in Sharm el-Sheikh. John.
Kevin, we appreciate the update. Kevin Lippick there live for us in Sharm el-Sheikh. Well, the COP27 summit is part of a week-long trip that will take President Biden to several major summits. From Egypt, he heads to Phnom Penh in Cambodia for the ASEAN summit on Saturday and Sunday. Then it's on to Bali, Indonesia for the G20. And there he's set to meet with Chinese leader Xi Jinping on the sidelines. First time the two have met in person since Biden was elected president. Ukrainian troops continue to close in on the occupied city of Kherson, slowly and with caution along the way, liberating more than 40 settlements in the south since Wednesday, when Russia announced its troops would begin to withdraw from Kherson. These images appear to show destroyed military hardware left behind by the Russians. Ukrainian military leaders say there are signs that Russia has started to pull out, but officials remain doubtful, fearing Moscow may turn Kherson into, quote, a city of death by booby-trapping whatever it can and shelling Ukrainians as they move in. The White House is taking a wait-and-see approach.
First, this is a significant military milestone for the Ukrainians if, in fact, it happens that Russia follows through and withdraws to the far side of the Dnieper River. Of course, we're going to watch actions and not just announcements to see what actually unfolds.
The Russian retreat from Kherson is a major blow to the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin. Kherson was the first major city that Russia captured and held since its invasion began in February. And for Ukrainians, they doubt the Russian soldiers are ready to give up the city and go quietly into the night. Here's more now from CNN's Nick Robertson.
A trap is what Ukrainian officials say they are concerned about as they advance towards Kherson. They say that they are going to complete this operation with military secrecy to protect their forces. But even so, through Thursday, they were making gains on the ground. Today, the village of Snihorivka is liberated, the soldier announces. His handful of troops claiming a small victory on the road to Kherson, well received by an apparently appreciative crowd. Elsewhere on Ukraine's cautious advance to liberate the port city, another tiny band of soldiers celebrate an objective secured. Since Russia's announced retreat, villages are being taken quickly. In Kalinivska, Russians fled so fast they left their flag, rapidly removed by the Ukrainians. Meanwhile, Russian troops retreating under orders east across the strategic Dnipro River characterize their ignominious exit as smart, noting the damage to the bridge that supplied them. Russia's defense chiefs are also spinning the withdrawal as a smart move to save soldiers' lives, but is in stark contrast to their callous and calamitous loss of soldiers in the war so far. What was once the jewel in Putin's conquest this year and illegally declared part of Russia less than 6 weeks ago is becoming the most embarrassing setback for Putin so far. Failure to spin retreat as smart strategy will undermine his leadership. Ukrainian officials continue to be skeptical of Putin's motives, question whether retreat is also a trap.
They are simply searching for a way out of a difficult situation. The fact that they so deliberately announced that they were moving to the left bank did not surprise anyone. But we understand that we will still have to fight.
On the battlefield, Ukrainian soldiers appear to be gaining momentum. Nevertheless, officials warn it could be days, even longer, before Kherson is safely under their control again. how safe it will actually be is unclear. Russian commanders say they're pulling their troops back to form defensive positions on the other side of the Dnipro River on the east bank. Both Ukrainians and Russians, however, after these battles are fought for Kherson, will be able to redeploy forces to other parts of the country, and that's a significant gain for both forces. Nick Robertson, CNN, Kryvyi Rih, Ukraine.
Ukraine will soon receive new air defences to combat drone attacks, part of a new $400 million US aid package, which includes 4 Avenger air defence systems which can shoot down helicopters, as well as drones. Also, Hawk missiles and other ammunition. In total, the US has provided $18.6 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since the war began. US officials have been urging the Ukrainian President Zelensky in recent weeks to show he's at least open to talks with Russia. CNN's Christiane Amanpour sat down with Zelensky and Ukraine's First Lady for an exclusive interview, and she pressed the president if he's being pressured to negotiate.
Mr. President, you've obviously heard there are all these articles being written, there are these foreign policy analysts who are saying, isn't enough already for you? Should you go to the negotiating table? Some of these countries with economic pressures on their own who are supporting you now, are you feeling any pressure to go to the negotiating table?
Look, they don't want this war to be finished. Now, before having any fatigue, everyone has to understand that it's only the Kremlin and only one person, the head of the Russian Federation, who's not tired of the war. For our part, we say, please respect our principles of the UN Charter. Please respect our territorial integrity. Please respect our people, our rights, our freedom, our land, and our choice. That's it. So this word, fatigue, is a big word. You can't get fatigued. So it's too early for all of us to get fatigued. But when Russia truly wants peace, we will definitely feel it and see that. But, you can't wish for peace with words alone. Words are not enough. Stop the war, withdraw from the territory, stop killing people, start reimbursing the damages inflicted on our country. Criminals must be prosecuted, so words are not enough.
Do you think the women are getting enough support? Tell me what this says about your country, that there's a huge level of women comparative to other NATO countries in the military and actually on the front line.
I think that the number of women who volunteered to join the armed forces, there's almost 40,000. That speaks for itself. These are the women who chose the path of the military in wartime, not in peacetime, when it would be more of a military romantic idea. There is a shortage of purely female things in the uniform, there's only male underwear in the army. Women in the armed forces are still unique, but it's not unique in Ukraine anymore. And this whole war, it continues our path towards gender equality. And we've already made great strides in this. So this war is as equal as Ukrainian society. I'm certain that after this war, women's rights will be even stronger. We've already made strides, and we already have women generals.
Bravery has no gender.
And later this hour, Christiane will report on the women fighting on the front lines of Ukraine, finally about to receive that equipment designed specifically for women, not men. It's a breakthrough in equality born in a moment of crisis. Well, still to come, the US Central Bank has been attacking sky-high inflation for months. Now, the latest government figures appear to show those Fed rate hikes are doing the job. Those details in just a moment. Also ahead, control of the US Congress in limbo. Dozens of races still too close to call. We'll take a closer look at how Republican election deniers have fared. It has just gone 31 minutes past the hour. Welcome back to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm John Vos. 3 days after the midterm elections, hundreds of thousands of ballots are still being counted in 2 key western states, Arizona and Nevada. The outcomes, along with the runoff in Georgia, will decide the future of the US Senate. Election officials say counting is underway as quickly as possible. Still, final results not expected until next week. Right now, CNN projects Republicans will have 49 Senate seats to the Democrats' 48. That means Democrats would have to take 2 of the 3 outstanding Senate races to be in the majority. Republicans are just 7 seats shy of claiming control of the US House. But with more than 30 races still undecided, it's still mathematically possible for Democrats to hit that 218 threshold. These midterms were the first national elections in the United States since the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. Republicans did not see the dramatic wins which they'd expected, and results were a mixed bag for the GOP election deniers. Several won or could still win their races, but others just didn't fare so well. CNN's Brian Todd breaks down the numbers.
A big theme in these midterms, the prominence of election deniers. We're focusing on those prominent deniers, starting in the states where deniers can still win really important races for senator, governor, and secretary of state. One of the most well-known and aggressive deniers in Arizona, Republican Kari Lake, still in a tightly contested race for governor. She's falsely declared that President Biden's win there in 2020 was stolen and demanded this year that Biden's 2020 win in Arizona be decertified, which is an impossibility. Another denier, Republican Blake Masters, still in that close race in Arizona for senator. In Nevada, a tight race could put denier Adam Laxalt in office as a U.S. senator. Laxalt's made several false claims about the 2020 election, saying it was rigged, and he's made baseless claims about the integrity of the vote count in that state. But there are also very important races for Secretary of State in Arizona and Nevada that have not been called yet. These are critical because the Secretary of State basically runs the election process in most states. And in those 2 states, aggressive election deniers are still in the running. In Nevada, Jim Marchant could be on the cusp of a victory. He has insisted that it was, quote, almost statistically impossible that Joe Biden won in Nevada in 2020, which is flat out wrong. And he's claimed that election winners in Nevada since 2006 have been, quote, installed by the deep state cabal. In Arizona, Mark Finchem is still in a tight race for Secretary of State. He's called for the arrests of Democrats who were involved in overseeing the 2020 election. These are men who could be running elections, certifying election results in those crucial states. Now, let's look at the prominent candidates among election deniers who've already won or lost. One of the big winners among deniers, J.D. Vance. He's going to be the next Republican senator from Ohio. Vance has claimed that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump and claimed that people were voting illegally on a large-scale basis, both completely false claims. Among the prominent losers, Don Bolduc, the Senate candidate from New Hampshire, and Doug Mastriano, the gubernatorial candidate from Pennsylvania. His campaign chartered buses to Donald Trump's rally in Washington on January 6th, and he was photographed on Capitol grounds that day, though he was never charged with anything. Brian Todd, CNN, Washington.
Voters consistently named the economy as their #1 concern at the midterm elections, and Thursday there was some encouraging news on inflation. Latest numbers for October shows inflation has eased to 7.7% over the past year, much better than the 8% many analysts had expected. Market responded, the Dow gaining 1,200 points. But experts warn not enough, and the Federal Reserve is widely expected to continue raising interest rates, maybe not as aggressively as before. To Los Angeles now, Ryan Patel, a senior fellow at the Drucker School of Management at Claremont Graduate University. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, John.
So the latest numbers are out, and on Wall Street, the clouds have cleared, the sun is shining, birds are singing, and the Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman has tweeted from on high. A soft landing for the economy is looking increasingly plausible. Plausible is an interesting choice of words because it means you could reasonably make the case for something to happen to be true, while possible means it's in fact capable of coming true. Where do you stand? Are you with the very nuanced Mr. Krugman, or with Wall Street investors who seem to believe the days of sky-high inflation could be coming to an end?
John, do you hear that? That's just a sigh of relief, but we're not over it yet. You know, it's nice to see that we are seeing some traction. I still don't know if we're at the peak yet. We've seen this, John, before, a handful of months ago, thinking we're at the peak. But I think it's showing that the inflation, you know, what the Fed is doing is working. That's the sigh. However, we're not out of the woods yet. We're trying to get to 2% inflation, where you just mentioned we're in the, you know, we were just at 8 coming down. It's going to take a little bit while, especially when you think about wage growth at the same time. So I'm not sitting here. Yes, I'm glad that market, this is what it feels like on a good day, John. This is great of this high volume that we're seeing, but we're not there yet.
I think it's always good to check in with the Chamber of Commerce president in Delmarva, Maryland, Bill Chambers, when you want to have some good old-fashioned, you know, nuanced advice here. He said, inflation bumping down 8.2% to 7.7% doesn't make a hill of beans in how a family is able to operate in this economy. You know what? He hit the nail on the head, because prices are still high. The impact of really high inflation hasn't gone away. Prices haven't come down. Price increases have slowed. So what does an average family here have to celebrate?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're going to see, these prices, it's great that we see this news, but it's not going to help change a cost in childcare, healthcare, or even food or restaurants. You know, I think when you also see the wages that are rising, wage prices also, John, are rising. So companies are going to do what? They're going to pass that cost to the consumer. So we're still going to see some price increases that you're going to pay, just the inflation that is coming down, but not coming down quick enough. And I think that's where the Fed, what we're going to see in December, 50 basis points most likely. In January, another 25 basis points. So for those who are taking this news that the market is happy thinking that the Fed is going to not increase anything, that's a false tense, because you're going to see them still be aggressive in the next couple of meetings.
Do we know what the Federal Reserve, in particular, you know, the torturer-in-chief, Jerome Powell, who keeps turning the screws, what are they actually looking for here in terms of, you know, falling inflation? Though 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, what's the number? Put a number on it.
Well, I would say 2 months, because they really need to kind of ratchet this back down. So the next month of the CPI index inflation will be telling to see if there's actual pricing dropping, not just inflation, but also prices, John, the everyday item. That's important in this, and as well as jobs. Don't forget, unemployment's a number that they're looking at. They're seeing the growth, job growth as well. So ideally 2, but conservatively, I have a feeling the Fed is not going to let off the gas until they see a couple months and then feel really comfortable. That's why I think the January meeting would be interesting. If they were going to come off of anything, it would be that meeting or maybe the next one after that.
And this gets into the timing of everything, because as Mr. Krugman pointed out, it's plausible at this point that we could have that, you know, that sort of that soft landing that seems so unobtainable, so sort of off there in the distance. What's the risk, though, that they do go too far here and they do tip the economy into a recession?
Yeah, I mean, the soft landing, and I hate to disagree, it's like the soft landing means there's a clear path, John, that I can see that we're getting there. There's too many variables and too mmany data points that are all over the place. So the soft landing, yeah, it's possible. I mean, but is it highly likely? I mean, probably not. Even the federal chairman said that that's probably not in the summer of that aspect. So I think what we're going to see, and more importantly, that the economy continues to be resilient, is actually going to cause some issues with the Federal Reserve in how they approach this. Again, when I say we're not out of the woods yet, we see the international conflict, we see Europe and their inflation prices, they're all going to have an impact. We're seeing companies having cuts, job growth issues going into this year. We're going to also see retail sales for fourth quarter, John. We got to pay attention to see if we're going to hit those same numbers that consumers are spending. And then we're going to go into the first couple quarters next year and see where we are as a state of the economy. And the Feds will be paying attention to see if it got better or did it take a step back.
I need a spreadsheet for all of this. Got to follow it all. It's hard. Ryan, that's why we have you. Thank you, Ryan Patel.
Thanks, John.
Cheers, mate. Take a break. When we come back, Hurricane Nicole takes a toll across parts of Florida, destroying homes, leaving thousands without electricity. Ain't over yet. Latest forecast in a moment. At least 2 people have died due to what was Hurricane Nicole. A powerful storm made landfall early Thursday along Florida's east coast. Dozens of beachfront homes and hotels have been declared unsafe in the wake of the storm. These images, captured from a dorm room at Flagler College at St. Augustine, Florida, show streets flooded once the hurricane hit. Student Cameron Kraft told CNN the water was about waist deep. They were trapped inside the dormitory. Nicole is now weakened to a tropical depression, but expected to produce significant rainfall as it continues to head north. Nearly 1 million people across the US are under a winter threat, including blizzard warnings. Some areas might receive a foot of snow. Let's go to CNN meteorologist Derek Van Dam for details on this. You've got a tropical storm one end, you've got a snowstorm at the other.
It's crazy to think that we're talking about that, right? I believe I learned something from you the last hour, something like the last time we had a blizzard warning and a tropical storm warning was back in Hurricane Sandy, 2012. So pretty interesting to see that we're talking about both a tropical system and a winter system at the same time, right? The change of seasons. Well, this is what's left of the winter storm across the northern plains and into the Midwest. Not much, just a few more inches of snow anticipated across North Dakota and extreme northwestern sections of Minnesota. There is a lot of wind associated with it, so it's blowing and drifting the snowfall. But what I'm going to show you now, well, here's the weather alerts that are currently ongoing. By the way, that ice storm warning, that's all thanks to the kind of the spray coming off of Lake Superior. But this is the remnants of what was Hurricane Nicole spiraling across the southeastern U.S. And so there it is. There you have it. The winter storm to the north, the tropical system impacting the southeast, and this is going to usher in and garner in a complete change in our weather pattern across the U.S., and I'll show you that in just one second. By the way, we have a tornado watch in place for places across South Carolina and portions of North Carolina as well. That severe weather shifts into portions of the mid-Atlantic for the day on Friday. These two systems are almost going to do a dance over the next 24 hours. What I mean by that is the moisture, that is the rainfall associated with the remnants of Nicole, is going to actually get swept up by this cold front that's producing the snowfall across the upper Midwest. They combine to produce an extremely wet weekend for the East Coast. So we've got travel headaches in place if you are traveling anywhere across the I-95 corridor, some of the airports, Syracuse, Pittsburgh to Columbus, as well as Cleveland, Roanoke, Richmond. The potential here for flash flooding exists. Anywhere you see that shading of yellow, that's for the mid-Atlantic, northern sections of New England, into the central Appalachians. We have the potential for flash flooding across that area. Again, that is all thanks to the remnants of Nicole that continue to move across the region, bringing wind as well as the potential of heavier rainfall onset across this particular region. Both of these systems working in tandem to produce this extremely wet weekend across the area. So do take care and double check those travel plans if you're traveling this weekend. John?
The climate is a-changing. Derek, thank you. Derek Van Dam. Appreciate that. Take a short break here on CNN. Back in a moment. Tens of thousands of Ukrainian women fighting against Russia's invasion are now getting supplies that will help them in battle. Supplies specifically made for women in war. For more on that, here's CNN's Christiane Amanpour.
At a nondescript storefront in Kyiv, covered with plastic against prying eyes, a major war effort is underway.
Oh, wow.
Boxes of kit reveal a first of its kind. Fatigues designed for a mother-to-be.
So was there never, Andre, anything for pregnant women before?
Never ever.
Now, how many pregnant women are fighting the Russians?
I'm not sure that a lot, but there are. Yeah.
Andre and Ksenia are married TV journalists in real life who now do this work. A female friend turned frontline sniper told them that she was pregnant and needed a new uniform. They're also sending female soldiers smaller boots, lighter Kevlar plates for their flak vests. On this day, Roxolana comes in for a new uniform. She's in an intelligence unit near the front and joined up in March totally unprepared. It's so valuable to have these people who understand that we are tired of wearing clothes that are 3 sizes too big, she tells me. We had no helmets, we had old flat jackets, we wore tracksuits and sneakers. Now we feel that we're humans. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense says there are more than 50,000 women under arms, more than 5,000 of them on the front line. Amongst them, Andrei's sister.
She received men's uniform, men's underwear, everything that designed for men.
Females also need customized sanitary, medical, and humanitarian supplies. Ksenia and Andrei have sent out 3,000 of these care packages. They've produced 300 uniforms and plan for at least another 2,000, all winterized. And then there's this vital tool.
Oh my God, I have never seen that. A feminine urinary director for women of all ages. Well, basically, they pee in that, right? If there's no toilet.
No, not in. They pee like men.
Look at that. Oh my God, if only I'd known that in all the years I was in the field.
And as a parting gift, they throw in this book on resilience and courage amid battle and in captivity, which happened to Elena Panina 5 months ago after the fall of Mariupol. She is part of a canine border guard unit, and like so many of the port city's defenders, she had been hunkering down in the giant Azovstal steel plant. She was recently released as part of an all-female prisoner exchange with Russia. We meet at this pizza bar run by vets.
Were you prepared for life as a POW?
No, I was not, she says. And we discussed this a lot with the other women prisoners, that life hasn't trained us for such an ordeal. While in captivity, though, I said I'll continue my service and I have no plans to stop. Back at their private procurement center, Andre says he wishes he could join his sister, father and brother-in-law all at the front. But a physical disability means that he's not eligible.
For a man, it's kind of hard to understand that you can't go there and your sister is there. So I'm trying to do my best here to help not only my family, but the whole army.
And the reviews from the battlefield are in. It's just amazing, says Anastasia. I'm happy as a child. The uniform is ideal, it looks great, and the fabric is very sturdy. Meantime, Roxolana's new boots are made for marching, all the way back to the front. Christiana Manpour, CNN, Kyiv.
Well, before we go, an update now. 3 days after the midterm elections, hundreds of thousands of ballots are still being counted in two key western states, Arizona and Nevada. Right now, CNN projecting Republicans will have 49 Senate seats, Democrats 48, which means Democrats would have to take 2 of the 3 outstanding Senate races for control of the upper house. Republicans are just 7 seats shy from claiming control of the U.S. House, the lower house that is, but with more than 30 races still undecided, it's mathematically possible for Democrats to reach the 218 threshold. Well, thank you for watching. I'm John Vors. Our special coverage of the midterm elections in the United States continues with Kim Brunhuber after a very short break. See you next week.
Welcome to all of you watching us here in the United States, Canada, and around the world. I'm Kim Brunhuber. 3 days after the U.S. midterm elections, and we still don't know who will control the next Congress. Everyone expected Republicans to make big gains, at least in the House, but exit polls show a slim majority of independent voters chose Democrats, averting a Republican landslide. In the Arizona Senate race, incumbent Democrat Mark Kelly is expanding his lead over Republican Blake Masters. Now, there are still about 500,000 ballots yet to be counted there. Kelly's campaign manager tells CNN, quote, "We remain confident we will win this race." And in Nevada, Republican challenger Adam Laxalt is still leading Democrat incumbent Catherine Cortez Masto, but new results reported late Thursday show her narrowing the gap. The good news for Democrats has President Joe Biden in a bipartisan mood. Here he is.
I'm prepared to work with Republicans, but the American people have made it clear they expect Republicans to work with me as well.
CNN is on the scene in both critical states out west. We'll hear from Gary Tuchman in Las Vegas, Nevada in just a bit, but we begin with Kyung La in Phoenix, Arizona.
Here in Maricopa County, the tedious work of democracy continues. Counting the vote, hanging in the balance is control of the U.S. Senate. Some 78,000 vote results were released this evening by Maricopa County. Didn't really change the races all that much percentage-wise, but the Democrats, who are currently on a razor-thin lead, they got just a bit more vote pad. Now, this is a slow process, and it is a careful process. What we're hearing, though, on the edges are some of the Republicans on this ballot who are frustrated, have been talking about some of these election officials might be doing this on purpose, releasing this slowly on purpose. And we got strong pushback by election officials here.
Quite frankly, it is offensive for Kari Lake to say that these people behind me are slow rolling this when they're working 14 to 18 hours. So I really hope this is the end of that now. We can be patient and respect the results when they come out.
The count continues. The election is not over in Maricopa County. Election officials are looking to start to zoom in on some of those election day ballots. Kyung La, CNN, Phoenix, Arizona.
Here in the largest county in the state of Nevada, Clark County, at the Clark County Election Center, we can tell you that the tabulators are done tabulating for the evening. They will resume on Friday. In these 17 counties in the state of Nevada, the Democratic candidate for Senate, who is an incumbent, the Democratic candidate for governor, who is an incumbent, are making up ground with the counting of mail-in ballots. Tens of thousands of ballots still need to be counted in the state of Nevada, but right now Catherine Cortez Masto, the Democratic senator, has made up about 7,000 votes today and is now behind her Republican challenger by 8,000 votes. Meanwhile, Governor Steve Sisolak has made up about 7,000 votes and is behind by 27,000 votes. So here in Clark County alone, the largest county in the state, there are at least 50,000 ballots still to count. These are not ballots that were done in person on Election Day. These are ballots that were mailed in or dropped in drop boxes on Election Day. Now, the ballots can come until Saturday. That's the rule here in Nevada. So either way, they would have been counting. They're not counting because it's close. They're counting because that's the law. As long as the ballots are postmarked by Tuesday, they could arrive by Saturday and be counted. So this will continue until at least Saturday. The counting will continue until Saturday, and we still don't know who the winners of these very high-profile races will be. This is Gary Tuckman, CNN in Las Vegas.
For more on this, Richard Johnson is a lecturer in U.S. politics at Queen Mary University of London, and he joins me now from Bedford, England. Thanks so much for being here with us. So looking at the exit polls, one interesting thing that came out of it for me was how well Democrats did with people who mildly disapproved of President Biden, the so-called meh voters. 49% of them supported Democratic candidates for the House and 45% backed Republicans. Why do you think that was?
Well, it seems that in some of the races, the president was not necessarily the forefront issue on voters' minds, which, I mean, we have to remember that, you know, once upon a time, midterm elections were just known as elections because they're not the middle of the term of the members of Congress, at the end of the term of members of Congress. It's just that the presidency has often loomed so large. But the thing that struck me about this set of midterm elections is that the quality candidates in different races has mattered, that we've seen split ticket voting. You know, these are things that people said were in decline as America's become more what we call an executive partisan centered system. That is to say that party and the president matter more than else. But I think we've seen a little bit of a pushback against that at this midterm election.
The fact that voters didn't seem to punish Biden for, you know, his unpopularity or for the economy, all the things that are going wrong. What do you think that will mean for Biden and his presidency, you know, for the next 2 years and maybe for 2024?
I think that these results help to stabilize Joe Biden's leadership of the Democratic Party. I mean, I always thought it was quite likely that, indeed very likely, that Biden would be the nominee for the Democrats next time along, so long as he's himself interested in it, which I think he is. I think that the results here remove most doubts of a viable challenger. Biden has shown himself able to hold together a rather disparate Democratic coalition across different parts of the country. And actually, he was able to mobilize certain elements of the Democratic coalition, particularly kind of suburban white voters at this election, who will prove crucial at the next presidential election as well. So I think he gets some brownie points for these results, which are, in relative terms, quite good for him.
All right, so then looking at the other side for Donald Trump, he promoted candidates who either lost or are losing winnable elections in key states. So it was a bad night for Trump, but not necessarily for Trumpism in a way, because the Trump wing of the party, the MAGA wing, will have more influence in the House if they get a narrow majority as expected. And already they're threatening to withdraw support for Kevin McCarthy for Speaker, demanding investigations and impeachment. So what kind of compromises do you think McCarthy, if he becomes Speaker, will have to make?
This is the paradox of these elections. The Trump-backed candidates underperformed. And again, I think candidate quality mattered. And some inexperienced people were supported by Donald Trump in the primaries and have proven not to be great candidates. What that means, though, is that the House and the Senate are going to be much closer. You know, let's say the Republicans do win control of the House. It's going to be a small majority. And that means that a small number of members of that Republican caucus can call the shots. And so the first challenge is going to be, who are they going to vote for to be Speaker. That's the first vote when the House meets in January. Are they going to vote for Representative Kevin McCarthy? Or are they going to say, actually, no, we're already going to try to demand concessions from you? Are we going to be the tail that wags the dog? And that could indeed be the case. So it's going to be a big challenge for McCarthy, I think, to try and hold together possibly quite a divided caucus with a small majority.
Yeah, huge challenge. So President Biden called it a good day for democracy. Liz Cheney said it was a clear victory for Team Normal. And as I say, the stakes are enormously high. As you've pointed out, the Congress, this Congress will be the Congress that certifies the results of the next presidential election. So given that there was, to a certain degree, a repudiation of Trumpism and election denialism at the polls, how big of a danger is that still for 2024?
It's less of a danger than it could have been in the sense that fewer candidates who denied the validity of the last election were elected. But still, for example, over 100 members of the House who deny that Joe Biden was rightfully elected president were either elected for the first time or re-elected. And as you say, so this is, what we have now are the state officers who will be managing the election, governors and secretaries of state who have an important role in the process of the Electoral College vote certifications being sent to Congress. And Congress itself will be the Congress that certifies those Electoral College votes. And I think it's really important over the next 2 years that the American public make it very clear to their representatives that they want their representatives to abide by the results of the election, however they may go. I think that is absolutely crucial for the future of American democracy.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to agree with that. Richard Johnson in Bedford, England, thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
U.S. President Joe Biden left Washington a few hours ago, heading for a series of international summits. His first stop is Egypt for the COP27 climate conference, while a live report coming up. Stay with us.
It was the first national election since January 6th, and there were a lot of concerns about whether democracy would meet the test. It did. It did. It did.
Welcome back to CNN's special coverage of the U.S. midterm elections. That was Joe Biden feeling pretty vindicated by the stand Democrats made. Senate races have yet to be called in Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, but all three could go Democrats' way. As of now, CNN projects Republicans will hold 49 seats, Democrats 48. 218 is the magic number needed for control of the House. Now, that is still mathematically possible for the Democrats, but Republicans are more likely to take over, winning 211 races so far. President Biden is en route to Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt this hour, where he'll attend the COP27 climate conference. In the coming hours, he'll meet with Egypt's president and deliver remarks at the summit. Biden is expected to call on nations to, quote, keep their eyes on the ball when it comes to reducing global emissions. He'll also highlight steps his administration has taken and plans to take to fight climate change. CNN senior international correspondent David McKenzie is there in Sharm el-Sheikh and joins us now live. David, so take us through what President Biden is expected to do over there.
Well, certainly he'll be touching down on Air Force One here in a couple of hours, Kim, and the question will be, will the U.S. be able to lead significant climate change action here? The talk before this meeting was that this was supposed to be a climate change conference of action. Well, we haven't quite seen that yet, I have to say, and as world leaders are wrapping up their sessions here, still, we need to see evidence of action to try and cut emissions, provide financing for developing countries, and give a huge amount of money to developing countries that have been smashed by climate catastrophes this year and into the future. Biden is expected to tout his own achievements on climate change through the Congress, I am sure. A big question also is whether he'll bring up Egypt's human rights record with the president in his meeting with President Sisi. I spoke to the chief climate envoy of the U.S., that's of course Secretary John Kerry. One other issue here is that there's been no formal talks between China and the U.S. Most people feel that's critical. Take a listen.
We're not formally negotiating at this point, but our hope is that within a short span of time, it will become possible for us to really get together again in full measure and do the things we need to be doing as the two leading emitters in the world and as the two largest economies in the world. China and the United States really need to cooperate on this. And without China, even if the U.S. is, as we are, moving towards a 1.5-degree program, which we are, if we don't have China, nobody else can make to that goal. And we blow through 1.5, and it will cost citizens around the world trillions of more dollars.
Politically, there is a sense that the U.S. and China will be competing in the years ahead, and some hawkish attitudes towards China. Do you think the cooperation on climate change will be accepted?
Well, there's nothing, I mean, competition is a pretty normal thing in the world of business. Businesses always compete for market share, for product line, and so forth. What President Biden has said is we can compete, but we don't have to be confrontational. We don't have to be in conflict. And I think that's what is critical here, is that we deal with the issues. And there are real differences between our countries, obviously. But climate should not fit into that bilateral pattern of those issues.
Well, the big question is if there are going to be significant actions taken at this climate change conference. I mean, I think many scientists and activists fear that there will be marginal changes, but not the significant cuts that need to happen to avoid the worst of the climate catastrophe. Kim?
All right, thanks so much. David McKenzie in Sharm el-Sheikh. U.S. financial markets are signaling a bullish start to today's trading session on Wall Street. We'll take a closer look at why investors are suddenly feeling optimistic. Plus, we'll have the latest on vote counting that's still underway in two battleground states that could decide which party controls Congress next year. Stay with us. Three days after the midterm elections, hundreds of thousands of ballots are still being counted at this hour in two key western states, Arizona and Nevada. The outcomes, along with a runoff in Georgia, will shape the future of the U.S. Senate. Election officials say they're processing the ballots as quickly as possible and expect to have final tallies next week. Right now, CNN projects Republicans will have 49 Senate seats, Democrats 48, which means Democrats would have to sweep all three outstanding Senate races to be the majority. Now, Republicans are just 7 seats away from claiming control of the U.S. House. But it wasn't the red wave that Republicans had been predicting for weeks. The U.S. stock market closed Thursday with one of its best days since 2020. The Dow soared 1,200 points on news that the rate of inflation may be slowing down after months of aggressive interest rate hikes. During the overnight hours, all three major U.S. futures have been signaling a bullish start at this morning's opening bell. And voters consistently named the economy as their top concern this election. And while Thursday's inflation report was encouraging, experts warn it's not enough. We got the latest from CNN's Richard Quest in New York.
It is always dubious to take 1 month's numbers and extrapolate it into a trend. But that's what the market is doing today. The welcome news that inflation was down at 7.7%, a long way lower than more than 9% in June, gave the market the view that perhaps the Fed would now slow down in increasing rates. At the next meeting, maybe 50 basis points, possibly even 25 basis points, instead of the 0.75% we've seen so far. That would be perhaps a step too far, because economists, one and all, pretty much agree the Fed is not done yet, that inflation has not been calmed, and what we're seeing with the exuberance of the market could well be washed away.
Has struck down President Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness program. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of 2 borrowers who didn't qualify for debt relief. The Justice Department says it will appeal the ruling. Nearly 26 million student loan forgiveness applications had been submitted as of last week, but the Biden administration has been banned from canceling any debt due to a separate legal challenge. Payments on federal student loans have been paused since March 2020 because of a pandemic-related benefit, and they're set to resume in January. China just announced changes to its COVID-19 protocols for international travelers. They include eliminating the controversial circuit breakers on international flights, which called for China-bound flights to be suspended if a certain number of passengers tested positive for the virus. Now, under the new rules, inbound travelers will also see their pre-departure testing requirements reduced to once in 48 hours instead of twice, and the mandatory quarantine upon arrival will be cut from 7 days to 5. And so far, markets have responded positively to the new changes. After the announcement, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index shot up 7%. Ukrainian troops are moving cautiously as they inch closer to the city of Kherson. But why caution if Russia said it's leaving the city anyway? Well, we'll explain that coming up after the break. Please stay with us. Ukraine is about to get more air defenses to combat drone attacks as part of a new $400 million U.S. aid package. It includes 4 Avenger air defense systems, which can shoot down helicopters and drones, as well as Hawk missiles and other ammunition. In total, the U.S. has provided $18.6 billion in security aid to Ukraine since the war began. Now, on the front lines, caution is the operating word as Ukrainian troops close in on the city of Kherson. Russia announced a pullout from the city on Wednesday, marking a humiliating failure for Moscow. But Ukraine says that Russia giving up on Kherson so easily could be too good to be true. Nick Robertson reports.
Today, the village of Snihurivka is liberated, the soldier announces. His handful of troops claiming a small victory on the road to Kherson, well received by an apparently appreciative crowd. Elsewhere on Ukraine's cautious advance to liberate the port city, another tiny band of soldiers celebrate an objective secured. Since Russia's announced retreat, villages are being taken quickly. In Kalinivska, Russians fled so fast they left their flag, rapidly removed by the Ukrainians. Meanwhile, Russian troops retreating under orders east across the strategic Dnipro River characterize their ignominious exit as smart, noting the damage to the bridge that supplied them. Russia's defense chiefs are also spinning the withdrawal as a smart move to save soldiers' lives, but is in stark contrast to their callous and calamitous loss of soldiers in the war so far. What was once the jewel in Putin's conquest this year and illegally declared part of Russia less than 6 weeks ago is becoming the most embarrassing setback for Putin so far. Failure to spin retreat as smart strategy will undermine his leadership. Ukrainian officials continue to be skeptical of Putin's motives, question whether retreat is also a trap.
They are simply searching for a way out of a difficult situation. The fact that they so deliberately announced that they were moving to the left bank did not surprise anyone. But we understand that we will still have to fight.
On the battlefield, Ukrainian soldiers appear to be gaining momentum. Nevertheless, officials warn it could be days, even longer, before Kherson is safely under their control again. Nick Robertson, CNN, Kryvyi Rih, Ukraine.
For more, Salma Abdelaziz is standing by in Kyiv. And Salma, we're just learning about a deadly Russian attack in Mykolaiv. What more can you tell us?
Yes, we're just getting these reports this hour, Kim. A really devastating strike on a 5-story residential building in Mykolaiv. That's a city that's very much near the front lines. It's been heavily shelled in the past. Officials there saying that this 5-story residential building was struck by Russian rockets, that 2 people were killed and 2 others wounded, and of course search and rescue operations are ongoing, so you could see that death toll rise. But let's also discuss Kherson. That's obviously the area now where all eyes are focused. And already we're seeing, Kim, Ukrainian forces reap the rewards of this Russian withdrawal, of this Russian pullout. More than 40 settlements have been claimed retaken by Ukrainian forces. That's according to President Zelensky in his nightly address. They're also pushing up those front lines from the south. They've pushed them up by 7 kilometers. That's over 4 miles, and retaken about 260 square kilometers of territory. That's about 100 square miles. So you're seeing this advance just in the last 24 hours since that announcement. Ukrainian forces able to take these large flatlands, these farmlands to the south of Kherson city as they inch closer and closer. But yes, there's still very much concern about Russia's intention here. The Ukrainian commander-in-chief saying this is a direct outcome of our counteroffensive. This isn't something Moscow simply gifted us here, and we must proceed cautiously. One official saying they're concerned that Russia could turn Kherson into a city of death, essentially filling it with booby traps, filling it, mining it, making it extremely dangerous for Ukrainian forces trying to move in. And if you take a look at a map, you can understand why they're concerned. The plan here is for Russia's forces to move to the other side of the Dnieper River, the eastern side, fortify those positions there, and essentially use that as a launching pad to attack Ukrainian forces as they move forward. So the clear messaging here from Ukraine is that we're going to move forward, but on our timeline, based on what we believe is right, not Moscow's. Kim?
All right. Thanks so much, Salma Abdelaziz in Kyiv. The weeks-long anti-government protest movement in Iran is getting high-profile support from a leading Iranian celebrity. The actress, who starred in the Academy Award-winning movie The Salesman, posted a picture of herself on Instagram not wearing a hijab, a move that defies Iran's morality police laws. CNN's Jomana Karaja has more on the story.
One prominent Iranian activist outside Iran described this bold move by actress Tarana Ali Dosti as a cultural earthquake. The actress, with a following of nearly 8 million people on Instagram, very popular, very famous in Iran for the role she played in the Oscar-winning film, the Iranian film The Salesman, shocked so many around the world by posting a photo of herself while still inside Iran with without her mandatory headscarf, the hijab, and holding up a sign with the Kurdish words Jinjan Azadi, which translates into women, life, freedom, what has become the slogan of the protests, the women's movement, and what has become this national uprising in Iran. Ali Dosti has also been known for speaking out, criticizing the regime. She is a human rights and women's rights defender. In recent days, she's also posted on social media saying that she is not going to leave her homeland, that she is going to stay in Iran, that she is going to defend those behind bars and the families of those who have been killed. And she said she is ready to pay a price for that. Now, we don't know if there's been any consequences after she posted this photo, but she is the latest in a series of high-profile figures in the country who have been speaking out, showing their support, showing solidarity with the protesters, something that is probably very embarrassing for the Iranian regime that for nearly 2 months now has been really pushing this narrative that the protests in this country, are a foreign conspiracy, a foreign plot that is aimed at destabilizing the country, that this is not a people's movement. Jomana Karachi, CNN, London.
In Brussels, prosecutors say they suspect a fatal stabbing was terror-related. At least one police officer was killed in the attack Thursday night. European Parliament President Roberta Metsola says she was shocked by the killing of the police officer in the line of duty. She said the attack feels personal because the Belgian police have worked closely with the Parliament for many years. Officials are investigating the incident. All right, for those of you watching us here in North America, CNN Newsroom continues after a break. For our international viewers, World Sport is next. With Georgia's Senate seat headed for a December runoff, control of the U.S. Senate is now focused on 2 close races in Arizona and Nevada. With hundreds of thousands of ballots still to be counted, Democratic incumbent Mark Kelly is expanding his lead over Republican challenger Blake Masters. Kelly's campaign manager tells CNN they expect to win. And in Nevada, new numbers show Democratic incumbent Catherine Cortez Masto is closing the gap on her Republican challenger Adam Laxalt, a prominent election denier. Here's what both candidates said as Tuesday's election got underway.
We are exactly where we want to be in this race. We have a lot of our votes coming in all across the state yet to be tabulated. We are going to win this race.
We are not done yet. Here's one thing I know. Our positive energy got us to where we are today, and we are going to make sure that positive energy continues to flow this week. We are going to get this done.
Money is pouring into Georgia's Senate runoff. Democrats are giving $7 million to incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock. Meanwhile, Republican groups announced a combined $3 million donation to Herschel Walker. Both men were out on the campaign trail Thursday. Nick Valencia has that.
Thursday was the start of what will no doubt be a very long 4 weeks for Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. The Republican challenger Herschel Walker kicked off his runoff campaigning here in Canton, Georgia, in front of a very sizable crowd alongside Republican Senator Ted Cruz, the first in what will likely be a cavalry of Republican leaders to come down here to the southern state over the next 4 weeks to help Walker with his runoff race. Addressing a crowd, a very sizable crowd here in a deeply red part of the state, a source close to the Walker campaign tells me that it is part of Walker's strategy to get out the vote and focus on red counties where they underperform compared to Republican incumbent Governor Brian Kemp, who was able to win his midterm election outright and avoid a runoff. At the rally, both Cruz and Walker boldly predicted a win during the runoff. We were also able to catch up with Cruz afterwards and ask him if he thought it was a good idea for Walker to invite former President Donald Trump to campaign alongside him as well.
Herschel's made clear he will welcome the support from President Trump, who's supporting him. He said he would welcome the support of Ron DeSantis. He'll welcome the support of anyone coming to campaign.
Meanwhile, Democratic incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock also kicked off his runoff campaigning just a couple blocks away from Ebenezer Baptist Church. Standing in front of a mural of the famed civil rights icon John Lewis, Warnock appeared to make a plea to those who may not have voted for him in the midterm.
And for those of you who made a different choice this time, whether for Herschel Walker or someone else, I want to speak directly to you. Over the next 4 weeks, I hope you will give me the opportunity to earn your vote.
But just how important will Georgia be in controlling the Senate? We won't know that until the races in Arizona and Nevada are wrapped up. But one thing is clear, for the second consecutive election cycle, Georgians find themselves right in the middle of the center of the political universe. Nick Valencia, CNN, Canton, Georgia.
The U.S. will have a record number of female governors in 2023. In Tuesday's elections, Arkansas with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and Massachusetts with Maura Healey elected their first female governors. As a result, 12 women will hold the top state spots across the U.S., and that includes 2 races where CNN hasn't projected a winner, but all the candidates are female. So the record-setting number will represent a fraction of the governors across the 50 states. The old record of 9 female governors serving concurrently was set in 2004. President Joe Biden is on his way to Egypt now for the COP27 Environmental Summit. It's part of a week-long trip that will take Biden to several major summits. From Egypt, he'll head to Phnom Penh, Cambodia for the Asian Summit on Saturday and Sunday, and then it's on to Bali for the G20 Summit. And there he's set to meet with Chinese leader Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the event, and it's the first time the two have met in person since Biden became president. Stephen Zhang joins me now from Beijing. So, Stephen, what can we expect to see out of this meeting?
Yeah, Kim, I think the prospect of the so-called world's most important bilateral relationship is as gloomy as Beijing's weather today, and that's something even U.S. officials have acknowledged even before the meeting. A senior Biden administration official told reporters on Thursday there's not going to be a joint statement after the meeting, and they're not expecting any so-called deliverables, and we may not even see a much easing of tensions. Now, she still insisted the point of this meeting is to keep lines of communication open between the two sides, including at the highest level, and also saying the aim is is to build rapport between the two leaders and to build the floor in this relationship that has been, of course, in a free fall. But the problem here is rapport doesn't seem to be the problem here, because the two men have talked to each other 5 times since Biden took office via phones and video links, and they obviously have known each other for years, spent a lot of time together as vice presidents. Each time they talked, they reminisced about the good old days. The problem that's been driving the two sides apart is really how each side views its own strengths and the other's intentions. From Washington's perspective, China under Xi Jinping has become increasingly authoritarian at home and increasingly assertive or even aggressive abroad. That's why Biden plans to raise the issue of human rights, for example, including Beijing's crackdown on Uyghur Muslims in the Xinjiang region, and also, of course, the issue of Taiwan. But from Beijing's perspective, though, the U.S. and its allies have been out to contain China's rise on the global stage. Mr. Biden has not only kept most of the Trump-era tariffs on Chinese imports, he's been ramping up restrictions on U.S. exports, technology exports to China, including crucial semiconductors. Not to mention, Mr. Biden on more than one occasion has said that U.S. is committed to defending Taiwan militarily. So all of those obviously reinforcing the sense of besiegement by the U.S. in the mind of the Chinese leadership. That's why Xi Jinping has made no secret of trying to reshape a world order led by the U.S. It's also worth noting both men simply cannot look weak because of their domestic situations. Mr. Xi obviously facing a growing pressure on the economy because of his own zero COVID policy, and Mr. Biden, despite faring better than expected, may still have to deal with a Republican-controlled Congress. So, Kim, a lot of items on the agenda, very high stakes, but fairly low expectations. Kim?
Interesting. All right, we'll be watching. Stephen Jang, appreciate it. At least 2 people have died due to what was Hurricane Nicole. The powerful storm made landfall early Thursday along Florida's east coast. Dozens of beachfront homes and hotels have been declared unsafe in the wake of the storm. A video captured from a dorm room at Flagler College in St. Augustine, Florida, shows streets flooded after the hurricane hit. Student Cameron Kraft told CNN the water was about waist deep. Now, Nicole has weakened to a tropical depression, but is expected to produce significant rainfall as it moves north. So let's get the latest now from CNN meteorologist Derek Van Dam. Derek, the pictures coming from Florida really paint a scary picture.
Yeah, they're right. You're right, Kim. In fact, Hurricane Nicole finishing what Hurricane Ian from the end of September began, what it actually started there. So let me take you back to the end of September when Hurricane Ian actually making landfall on the western coastline of the Florida Peninsula. That also impacted the East Coast where Nicole made landfall just 24 hours ago. It compromised several buildings along the Daytona Beach region, and Hurricane Nicole came up. It was just enough to really impact these buildings and cause many of them to fall into the sea and degrading some of the outer edges of the buildings as well. Just incredible, striking imagery. Can you imagine if this was your home and what you would have to deal with? Priceless memories there just washing out to sea. Really incredible. So here's the latest from Hurricane Nicole. It did make landfall right across this area. That's the east coast of Florida. Now traversing into southern Georgia. You can see that spin right about there. Here, I'll draw it on the map. You can see basically right where I draw that X. That is the center of what is now a tropical depression. It is overspreading heavy rainfall across Georgia, but it's also influencing the weather across the coastal areas of the Carolinas in the form of spin-up tornadoes. In fact, the Storm Prediction Center has a tornado watch overnight across this region. Charleston, Garden City, northward into Columbia as well. It doesn't take much for these tropical enhanced tornadoes to spin up. It gets that interaction with the coastline, some friction from the ground, and that allows for thunderstorms to produce a brief, relatively weak tornado, but the potential there to impact property and life as well. Now, that threat of severe weather for the day on Friday to start off the weekend, that moves into portions of the mid-Atlantic. Look at that, marginal risk for Washington, D.C. A brief tornado, damaging winds can't be ruled out. This is all associated with the remnants of Nicole. Now, this is really interesting because we have a full-on blizzard and winter storm taking shape across the northern plains at the moment. Both of these systems are going to interact, kind of do a dance over the next 24 hours, absorbing this system and also enhancing the rainfall that we anticipate over the eastern third of the country. So we are going to see more travel delays to start off the weekend as a wet weekend is expected for places like Pittsburgh, into Charlotte, Roanoke, Cleveland, as well as New York, D.C., and Richmond. These areas anticipate anywhere from 1 inch of rain along the coastline, but just outside of the I-95 corridor, up to 2 to 4 inches of rain locally. So mid-Atlantic into the northern sections of New England, you can see Weather Prediction Center there has a slight risk of flash flooding. So we want to monitor that closely, double check your plans. Lots of wind associated with this system as well. We have wind advisories. And by the way, Kim, we're going to see the mercury in the thermometer plummet over the next coming days. It is about to get very cold, our first taste of winter on our doorstep.
Yikes. All right. Thanks so much, Derek Van Dam. Appreciate it. All right. Medical centers in the U.S. are reporting long wait times and a lack of facilities due to a spike in respiratory illnesses. Hospitals in Boston have been swamped with children suffering from the virus RSV, leaving many pediatric IC units low on beds. According to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, 22 states are reporting high or very high respiratory illness activity. The outbreak coincides with a flu season that's hitting harder and earlier than usual. The number of flu cases, hospitalizations, and deaths nearly doubled in the last week of October and took another significant jump in the first week of November. Well, thanks so much for watching. I'm Kim Brunhuber. Stay with us. I'll be back with more news after the break. Welcome to all of you watching us here in the United States, Canada, and around the world. I'm Kim Brunhuber. You may be waiting until next week to learn the outcome in a number of key races in the U.S. midterms, but results trickling in late Thursday showed Democrats pulling ahead or catching up in several important contests. Republicans still hold the edge in the House with 211 wins, but it's still possible for Democrats to reach a majority with 218 seats. 3 Senate seats have yet to be decided. As of now, CNN projects Republicans will have 49 seats, Democrats 48. In Nevada, incumbent Democrat Catherine Cortez Masto is closing the gap on Republican Adam Laxalt with tens of thousands of votes still to be counted. And in Arizona, incumbent Democrat Mark Kelly is expanding his lead over Republican Blake Masters. CNN estimates show about 500,000 votes yet to be counted there. Arizona's governor race is also too close to call, and Republican candidate Kari Lake is openly accusing election officials without evidence of deliberately slowing down the vote count. CNN's Kyung La has the latest from Phoenix.
Here in Maricopa County, the tedious work of democracy continues. Counting the vote, hanging in the balance is control of the U.S. Senate. Some 78,000 vote results were released this evening by Maricopa County. Didn't really change the races all that much percentage-wise, but the Democrats, who are currently on a razor-thin lead, they got just a bit more vote pad. Now, this is a slow process, and it is a careful process. What we're hearing, though, on the edges are some of the Republicans on this ballot who are frustrated, have been talking about some of these election officials might be doing this on purpose, releasing this slowly on purpose. And we got strong pushback by election officials here.
Quite frankly, it is offensive for Kari Lake to say that these people behind me are slow rolling this when they're working 14 to 18 hours. So I really hope this is the end of that now. We can be patient and respect the results when they come out.
The count continues. The election is not over in Maricopa County. Election officials are looking to start to zoom in on some of those election day ballots. Kyung La, CNN, Phoenix, Arizona.
Republican leader Kevin McCarthy says President Biden congratulated him when they spoke on the phone Wednesday, even though the GOP hasn't officially won the House. In fact, there's no guarantee McCarthy would be elected Speaker, even if they do. He's already facing a challenge from members of the House Freedom Caucus. Listen to this.
They don't give gavels out by small, medium, and large. They just give you the gavel, and we're going to be able to govern. What was our mission? To win the majority, to stop Biden's agenda, and fire Nancy Pelosi. All of that is accomplished.
One influential Republican who's not convinced is Florida's Matt Gaetz. He's endorsing Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan for House Speaker.
With such a slim majority, we shouldn't be starting the C team. We need to put our star players in a position to shine brightest so that we can attract more people to our policies and ideas. The policies Kevin McCarthy has pushed, they are as unhelpful as they are unserious.
Republican Liz Cheney won't be returning to Congress in January, and she's celebrating the stronger than expected showing by Democrats in the midterms. Listen to this.
I think that it was a clear victory for Team Normal. We have a huge amount of work to do, but I think that you saw in really important races around the country, people coming together to say we believe in democracy, we believe in standing up for the Constitution and for the Republic, and a real rejection of the toxicity and the hate and the vitriol and of Donald Trump.
Cheney lost the Republican primary in Wyoming after serving as vice chair of the January 6th committee, speaking out forcefully against Donald Trump. Now, the former president could announce his 2024 bid for the White House on Tuesday night. He's confirmed he will make a special announcement from Mar-a-Lago. Sources tell CNN Trump wanted to throw his hat in the ring before the midterms, the night before the midterms, and some are urging him to wait until after the Georgia Senate runoff is decided in early December. Well, U.S. President Joe Biden is on his way to Egypt at this hour, where he'll deliver remarks at the COP27 climate conference in Sharm el-Sheikh. It's the first of 3 high-profile international gatherings on his agenda. Later Friday, he heads to Cambodia for the Asian Summit. He will also travel to Indonesia for a G20 meeting. But before he left, Biden took a victory lap with fellow Democrats. Jerry Diamond has that.
Well, President Biden still riding high on Democrats, precedent-defying midterms showing on Tuesday, holding a rally with Democratic National Committee staffers. The president thanking them for their work on the campaign. But what he was really trying to do was to capitalize on the energy that has been buzzing in Democratic circles since that showing on Tuesday, and also trying to project strength. Despite what we saw, which appeared to be somewhat of a victory rally, Democrats, including those inside the White House behind me here, they certainly do acknowledge the very high likelihood that they will face a Republican majority in the House come January. And so that's part of why these optics were so important to the president and to his advisors as they were setting up these remarks. I'm told by a Biden advisor that the goal was to project strength and to show that this energy in the Democratic Party is very real as they prepare for this possibility of a Republican House. The president also in his remarks, he didn't acknowledge that that's going to happen, but you did hear him talk about how he is going to deal with Democrats.
If Republicans try to walk away from the historic commitment we just made to deal with the climate crisis, I will not let that happen. If Republicans try to cut Social Security and Medicare, I will not let that happen. And if they try to cut taxes for the super wealthy again, the biggest corporations like they did in the last administration, I will not let that happen either.
Now, when I asked the White House press secretary what specifically the president would be willing to compromise on with Republicans, she couldn't point to any specific issue areas. But clearly, what you see here is the White House setting the table for a prospect that they haven't experienced so far in President Biden's nearly 2 years in office, and that is divided government, power sharing. And we know that if there is indeed a Republican House, there will be a series of showdowns and standoffs, and the White House very much trying to position itself from a place of strength for those potential negotiations. Now, the president, he isn't giving up entirely on the possibility of Democrats winning the House before heading off on his trip to Egypt and Asia, saying that he believes that chances Democrats could still win the House are, quote, still alive. He said he'd have to pull an inside straight to make it happen, but again, he said it's still alive. Jeremy Diamond, CNN, the White House.
All right, let's go live to Los Angeles and CNN political reporter Maeve Reston. So looking deeper into the numbers here, I'm curious to get your take on 2 trends which seem like a contradiction. So first of all, abortion did seem to be an important issue for Democrats, but Democrats lost support among women in 2022 compared with 2018. So why do you think that is?
Well, I think that women in this election, many of the women that I spoke to out on the trail, were really feeling a lot of cross pressures. A lot of them were really angry about inflation and the impact that that's had on their families' budgets, but also really feeling a rejection of the Republican agenda on abortion and feeling as though the Republicans had been going in too much of an extreme direction. So for a lot of women, there were actually a lot of older women who made up their mind later on in this election, which is unusual, but they were, making decisions along those lines. And I do think that what we're seeing with abortion is that it really varies from state to state. In states like Pennsylvania and Michigan, that did become a top concern for many of the women who are voting there, and that's why we saw strong Democratic victories in those states. Whereas other states like Nevada, we are seeing potentially inflation ending up coming out on top in those decisions.
All right, so looking elsewhere in states that Donald Trump said had unfair elections in 2020, election denialism was generally rejected, though the big asterisk is Arizona, and as expected, Republican candidate for Governor Kari Lake fanning the flames of another round of baseless voter fraud claims. You've been watching this race closely. What's your take on where things stand and where they might be headed?
Well, that race is just so close at this point between Kari Lake and Katie Hobbs. And it's not just Kari Lake. In Arizona, Trump's slate of there's 4 top candidates there. They're a part of Trump's slate, and they're all election deniers. So we really did see a big rejection of election deniers across the country. But that is something that we're watching incredibly closely in both Arizona and Nevada. That race in Arizona, though, Kari Lake became a household name as a television anchor for many years in Phoenix. And so you're just seeing those 2 candidates battle it out as each tranche of votes comes in. And election officials have told us that they will be counting, into next week through the Veterans Day holiday, through the weekend. So we may see that race go up and down. And of course, Maricopa County is where, all of that action is. We're seeing a lot of, conspiracy theories being spread on social media among right-wing figures. And the election officials there are being very proactive about coming out immediately and trying to squelch those by speaking to the press about what's happening and being very transparent about their processes. But once again, that's just ground zero for conspiracies again.
Yeah, I wonder about how they'll be able to harness that going forward. Democrats did fairly well in the gubernatorial races, and we saw the importance of state governance in the context of national elections in 2020. So what difference do you think that might make?
Well, I think a lot of people who are voting in Arizona, a lot of the independents that I talked to, were very concerned about some of those election integrity issues. And I talked to a lot of voters who were just so sick of hearing, former President Trump's lies about the 2020 election, and said, I want to talk about things that are important to me and to my family. But also a lot of people who were just really unnerved by the fact that those top candidates in places like Arizona and Nevada, where the Secretary of State candidate has said he would not have affirmed Joe Biden's victory in 2020, there are a lot of voters who decided to go with the Democratic ticket because of that. So we're seeing how that shakes out in the results. We also did see independents, a lot of them sort of swinging back and forth between the 2 parties again this time. And so we'll just have to watch as the votes keep coming in. And in places like here in California, we could be counting for weeks. So it may be a long time before we know control of the House.
All right. Appreciate your take, Maeve Reston in Los Angeles. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
The U.S. Central Bank has been attacking sky-high inflation for months now. The latest government figures appear to show the Fed's rate hikes are working. We'll have these details just ahead. Plus, Ukraine's flag is flying in more places as its troops inch closer to the city of Kherson. We'll look at why Ukraine says it's moving cautiously, even though Russia claims it's leaving the city. Stay with us. The U.S. stock market closed Thursday with one of its best days since 2020. The Dow soared 1,200 points, up 3.7% on news that the rate of inflation may be slowing after months of aggressive interest rate hikes. Voters consistently named the economy as their top concern this election. And while Thursday's inflation report was encouraging, experts say it's not enough. We get the latest from CNN's Richard Quest in New York.
It is always dubious to take 1 month's numbers and extrapolate it into a trend. But that's what the market is doing today. The welcome news that inflation was down at 7.7%, a long way lower than more than 9% in June, gave the market the view that perhaps the Fed would now slow down in increasing rates. At the next meeting, maybe 50 basis points, possibly even 25 basis points, instead of the 0.75% we've seen so far. That would be perhaps a step too far, because economists, one and all, pretty much agree the Fed is not done yet, that inflation has not been calmed, and what we're seeing with the exuberance of the market could well be washed away in a few days' time. For the moment, everyone knows there's a wall of money waiting to come back in the market, and the first sign of light that inflation may be turning is welcome news indeed, but it's not over yet. Richard Quest, CNN at the New York Stock Exchange.
During the overnight hours, all three major U.S. futures have been signaling a bullish start at this morning's opening bell, but before that happens, traders will observe 2 minutes of silence in honor of Veterans Day. And the British government reports the UK economy has been shrinking at an alarming rate this year, raising fears a lengthy and difficult recession could be around the corner. The latest numbers show the country's productivity fell 0.2% in the third quarter and declined 0.6% in September alone. That's when Queen Elizabeth died and many UK businesses were temporarily shut down. Now we'll have a quick check on the European markets. They show that they're all in positive territory right now. Well, the runoff in Georgia's U.S. Senate race is a little less than a month away. Both candidates were out stumping for votes Thursday as money pours in from Washington. We'll have the latest coming up. Please stay with us. Welcome back to all of you watching us here in the United States, Canada, and around the world. I'm Kim Brunhuber. Ukraine says at least 2 people are dead after a Russian rocket strike on the city of Mykolaiv. Officials say rockets tore through a 5-story residential building overnight, leaving 2 other people wounded. Meanwhile, caution is the operating word as Ukrainian troops close in on the city of Kherson. They've reportedly liberated more than 40 settlements, and Russia announced its pullout from the city on Wednesday. But Ukrainian officials say Russians are setting booby traps wherever they can and may shell Ukrainians as they move in. Ukraine also says Russian troops are destroying key infrastructure on their way out. Tens of thousands of Ukrainian women fighting against Russia's invasion of their country are now getting supplies that will help them in battle, supplies made specifically for women in war. Here's CNN's Christiane Amanpour with that report.
At a nondescript storefront in Kyiv, covered with plastic against prying eyes, a major war effort is underway. Boxes of kit reveal a first of its kind. Fatigues designed for a mother-to-be.
So was there never, Andre, anything for pregnant women before?
Never ever.
Now, how many pregnant women are fighting the Russians?
I'm not sure that a lot, but there are. Yeah.
Andre and Ksenia are married TV journalists in real life who now do this work. A female friend turned frontline sniper told them that she was pregnant and needed a new uniform. They're also sending female soldiers smaller boots, lighter Kevlar plates for their flak vests. On this day, Roxolana comes in for a new uniform. She's in an intelligence unit near the front and joined up in March totally unprepared. It's so valuable to have these people who understand that we are tired of wearing clothes that are 3 sizes too big, she tells me. We had no helmets, we had old flat jackets, we wore tracksuits and sneakers. Now we feel that we're humans. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense says there are more than 50,000 women under arms, more than 5,000 of them on the front line, amongst them Andrei's sister.
She received men's uniform, men's underwear, everything that designed for men.
Females also need customized sanitary, medical, and humanitarian supplies. Ksenia and Andrei have sent out 3,000 of these care packages. They've produced 300 uniforms and plan for at least another 2,000, all winterized. And then there's this vital tool.
Oh my God, I have never seen that. A feminine urinary director for women of all ages. Well, basically, they pee in that, right? If there's no toilet.
No, not in. They pee like men.
Look at that. Oh my God, if only I'd known that in all the years I was in the field.
And as a parting gift, they throw in this book on resilience and courage amid battle and in captivity, which happened to Elena Panina 5 months ago after the fall of Mariupol. She is part of a canine border guard unit, and like so many of the port city's defenders, she had been hunkering down in the giant Azovstal steel plant. She was recently released as part of an all-female prisoner exchange with Russia. We meet at this pizza bar run by vets.
Were you prepared for life as a POW?
No, I was not, she says. And we discuss this a lot with the other women prisoners, that life hasn't trained us for such an ordeal. While in captivity, though, I said I'll continue my service and I have no plans to stop. Back at their private procurement center, Andrei says he wishes he could join his sister, father and brother-in-law all at the front. But a physical disability means that he's not eligible.
For a man, it's kind of hard to understand that you can't go there and your sister is there. So I'm trying to do my best here to help not only my family, but the whole army.
And the reviews from the battlefield are in. It's just amazing, says Anastasia. I'm happy as a child. The uniform is ideal, it looks great, and the fabric is very sturdy. Meantime, Roxolana's new boots are made for marching, all the way back to the front. Christiana Manpour, CNN, Kyiv.
Herschel Walker and Senator Raphael Warnock have a few more weeks to make their case to Georgia voters. We'll have a check on the runoff still ahead. Please stay with us. Three days after the U.S. midterm elections, hundreds of thousands of ballots are still being counted at this hour in two key western states, Arizona and Nevada. Election officials say counting is underway and will wrap up as quickly as possible, with final results expected next week. The outcomes, along with a runoff in Georgia, will shape the future of the U.S. Senate. And money is pouring into the Georgia runoff election in December, and the candidates were already out stumping for votes on Thursday. Incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock held a rally in Atlanta. Democrats are pumping $7 million into his campaign. Republican candidate Herschel Walker was joined by Senator Ted Cruz in North Georgia, and he's getting a combined $3 million from GOP groups. Both candidates have honed their messages for the runoff campaign. Here they are.
I came really to ask you one question. Are you ready to do this one more time? I did warn y'all that we might be spending Thanksgiving together. And here we are.
You got to get out and vote because, you know, he hung around and got into this runoff, and he thinking he's going to win. We need to prove him wrong and let him get out of that office.
And joining me now here in Atlanta is Julianne Thompson. She's a Republican strategist and president of Main Street Network Strategies. Thanks so much for being here with us. So, you know, just a couple of years ago, it might have seemed unthinkable that Florida would appear deep red and Georgia the swing state. So how will this runoff, you think, differ from the November contest between the two men?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And this runoff will be very different from the general election in the fact that we now see that the state of Georgia is going to be the state that determines, most likely will be the state that determines who holds power in the United States Senate It is absolutely possible for us to have a 50-50 Senate like we did before. And in that case, Kamala Harris would hold the deciding vote. So Democrats technically only need 50 votes in the United States Senate. Republicans would need 51 in order to hold power. And that is where the state of Georgia would come into play. So over the next few weeks, we are going to see the entire political nation descend upon the state of Georgia, where I live, incidentally. And so it's going to be ground zero for United States politics for the next month.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we saw just from the November election, race seemed to have played a huge role, even though both candidates are black. White voters in Georgia chose Herschel Walker, regardless of gender and education. So I wonder whether it'll come down to persuasion or engagement. I want to play a clip here from Democratic candidate Raphael Warnock.
And for those of you who made a different choice this time, whether for Herschel Walker or someone else, I want to speak directly to you. Over the next 4 weeks, I hope you will give me the opportunity to earn your vote.
So for both parties here, will most of the effort, time, money be spent trying to convince new voters or to convince voters who were lukewarm on either candidate the first time around?
Well, I think that any smart candidate will focus on coalition building throughout the state of Georgia, because you can't just focus on the base that came out to vote for you in the general election. And even some of those swing voters that decided on one candidate or the other during the general election need to be persuaded to show up again 4 weeks later for the runoff. And that is the most difficult thing that a party, whether it's the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, can face, is building the momentum to see people turn out again in 4 weeks. And so whoever has the best coalition building, whoever has the best grassroots machine over the next 4 weeks is going to be the person that wins the runoff. It's not going to be about the power speakers that come in, the stars of the Democratic Party or the stars of the Republican Party. It's not going to be about that. It's not going to be about
the money? That's one thing you haven't mentioned. I mean, the two parties are pumping even more money into the race. Raphael Warnock has spent more than $70 million on ads. I think he spent a historic amount on his campaign. And both parties have spent almost $250 million. But, you know, living here in Atlanta, I can tell you, you know, people I talk to, they're fed up with all these ads. What difference do you think it'll make?
Well, of course, the ads are going to continue throughout the runoff, and that is where the bulk of the money that is coming in is going to be going. But there's going to be hard money and there's going to be soft money. The hard money is given directly to the campaigns for the campaigns to use as they choose, which can include the grassroots mobilization and the get out the vote efforts. And then there's going to be soft money that can be used by outside groups to support the candidate. And so I'm sure most of that, the bulk of that, will be spent on ads. So it will be interesting to see exactly how much money this race pulls in. From all accounts, from what I hear from people on both sides, they're expecting anywhere from $250 to $500 million. Of course, depending on how the Nevada race and the Arizona race turn out. But the trajectory of both races right now looks to be that the Democrats will take Arizona, the Arizona Senate seat, and the Republicans will take Nevada. So that puts us back. It really, the whole election was kind of a wash as far as the Senate was concerned, because Pennsylvania went to the Democrats and it looks as though Nevada is flipping for the Republicans. So they've kind of just switched. So we're back exactly to where we were before, with the state of Georgia in a runoff deciding who controls the Senate. So
yet again. And the elephant in the room, of course, is whether Donald Trump will run for 2024 and what effect that might have on this race. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. But thanks so much for talking to us. I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon about this fascinating and maybe decisive race. Julianne Thompson in Atlanta. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Kim Brunhuber. For our international viewers, Marketplace Middle East is next. For viewers here in the U.S. and Canada, please stay with us. I'll be back with more CNN Newsroom after the break. U.S. President Joe Biden is currently en route to Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, where he'll attend the ongoing COP27 climate conference. He'll meet with Egypt's president and deliver remarks in the coming hours. Biden is expected to call on nations to, quote, keep their eyes on the ball when it comes to reducing carbon emissions and limiting global warming. He'll also highlight steps his administration has taken to fight climate change. CNN senior international correspondent David McKenzie is there in Sharm el-Sheikh, and he joins us now live. So, David, take us through the president's agenda and what we're expecting from the U.S.
Well, Kim, in a short few hours, Air Force One will touch down here in Sharm el-Sheikh, and President Biden, I'm sure, will be trying to highlight his legislative wins this year in terms of moving the U.S. into a more positive frame when it comes to climate change. But there is a massive amount of work that needs to be done. Some 45% is needed to cut on current pledges of emissions to get anywhere close to the Paris Agreement 1.5 degrees Celsius that was seen as the threshold to avoiding the worst of the climate crisis. So I'm sure the president will be showing off his agenda, trying to show leadership. One of the big issues here, though, is the fact that China and the U.S., the two biggest emitters, have not been talking. I spoke to the climate envoy, Secretary John Kerry, and asked him whether formal talks were happening.
We're not formally negotiating at this point, but our hope is that within a short span of time, it will become possible for us to really get together again in full measure and do the things we need to be doing as the two leading emitters in the world and as the two largest economies in the world. China and the United States really need to cooperate on this. And without China, even if the U.S. is, as we are, moving towards a 1.5 degree program, which we are, if we don't have China, nobody else can make to that goal. And we blow through 1.5, and it will cost citizens around the world trillions of more dollars.
Politically, there is a sense that the U.S. and China will be competing in the years ahead, and some hawkish attitudes towards China. Do you think the cooperation on climate change will be accepted?
Well, there's nothing, I mean, competition is a pretty normal thing in the world of business. Businesses always compete for market share, for product line, and so forth. What President Biden has said is we can compete, but we don't have to be confrontational. We don't have to be in conflict. And I think that's what is critical here, is that we deal with the issues. And there are real differences between our countries, obviously. But climate should not fit into that bilateral pattern of those issues.
If there's one theme that has emerged here in COP, though, Kim, it is financing for poorer countries to adapt and to deal with the worst impacts of the climate crisis. And of course, in the U.S., Congress holds the purse strings, and with the Congress hanging in the balance, any pledges that President Biden might make in terms of funding poorer countries could be something that he can't deliver. So we'll see if the president can make some significant promises in the area of financing developing countries. As Secretary Kerry told me, we're all in this together. Everyone needs to do their bit to try and avoid the worst of the climate catastrophe. Kim?
I appreciate your reporting out there in Sharm el-Sheikh, David McKenzie. Medical centers in the U.S. are reporting long wait times and a lack of facilities due to a spike in respiratory illnesses. Hospitals in Boston have been swamped with children suffering from the virus RSV, leaving many pediatric ICU units low on beds. According to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, 22 states are reporting high or very high respiratory illness activity. The outbreak coincides with a flu season that's hitting harder and earlier than usual. The number of flu cases, hospitalizations, and deaths nearly doubled in the last week of October and jumped again in the first week of November. At least 2 people have died due to what was Hurricane Nicole. The powerful storm made landfall early Thursday along Florida's east coast. Dozens of beachfront homes and hotels have been declared unsafe in the wake of the storm. Thousands across the state remain without power. One man describes seeing the damage to his home. Here he is. Listen.
I don't know. Honestly, just kind of shocked. So still haven't really processed it, but definitely crazy.
Nicole has now weakened to a tropical depression, but it's still producing significant rainfall as it moves north. So let's get the latest now from CNN meteorologist Derek Van Dam. Derek, the pictures coming from Florida really paint a scary picture.
Yeah, it really does. In fact, Hurricane Nicole finishing what Hurricane Ian started roughly 40 days ago. Remember, Hurricane Ian slammed into the Florida Peninsula at the end of September. It really compromised many of the coastlines, including Daytona Beach and those areas you saw on the video just a moment ago. And it just took another Category 1, a weaker storm than Ian, to come through and do this. It really compromised the structures. Can you imagine if this was your house or your business? That's priceless memories just being swept out to sea. Very, very scary moments for people there, and just really sad to actually have to clean up after yet another hurricane. Look at this. This is the same system. It is now a tropical depression churning about the southeastern U.S., but I want you to take note of this shading of red. That is where the Storm Prediction Center has issued a tornado watch, and just within the past 15 minutes or so, it has just been canceled since I've been waiting to go live here, but we did have a tornado warning for Columbia, South Carolina. This is very typical with a tropical storm that's moving into the area just off the coastline, so that draws in the instability and allows for some of those spin-up thunderstorms to form a tornado or two, and that threat of tornadoes exists across the mid-Atlantic and into the nation's capital today as well, a marginal risk for you. Now, I want you to see that shading of white on the northern portions of our country. That is a full-on blizzard that has been taking shape, and I'll explain why that's important in just a moment, but let's take you to Bismarck, North Dakota, so you can see that first taste of winter that is impacting the U.S. right now. Wow, remember that? It's been a while, right? Well, it's coming, and, you know, we are set to see more scenes just like this as we get our first lake-enhanced snow event that is coming through. Get back to the graphics, and you'll see the remnants of Nicole. That'll interact with that, what was a blizzard maker, and that's going to produce a very wet and rainy weekend along the eastern seaboard, at least from today right through Saturday. You can see the rainfall totals here exceeding 3 to 4 inches, especially for some of the northern interior of New England, as well as the mid-Atlantic states. So we're going to look out for some travel disruptions across the region. Now, we're also anticipating some snowfall downwind of the Great Lakes as well. So lots going on. This is the changeover of seasons. We had a tropical storm and a blizzard, both of them working together to create kind of a travel headache this weekend. Kim?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Derek Van Dam, thanks so much. And that blizzard that Derek was talking about has caused lots of cancellations and forced many people to change their plans. But a couple in North Dakota isn't letting the snowstorm stop them from walking down the aisle. Have a look at this.
We decided Veterans Day, it's Ethan's grandparents' anniversary as well that day. So we figured November 11th would be a great day. We just had such a good fall that we were so hopeful. It might be 70 degrees on our wedding day, and here we are with a couple inches of snow instead.
Now, all the snow means some members of the wedding party might not make it, but the couple says that's a minor bump in the road. Something enjoyed by children for thousands of years is just one of the items inducted into the National Toy Hall of Fame. The spinning top, Light Bright, and action figures from Mattel's Masters of the Universe have been added to its collection. They beat out other finalists, including Bingo, Nerf toys, and the Piñata. According to the museum's curator, the spinning top has been around for more than 5,000 years. It was developed by countless cultures and, quote, is as pure as a toy can get. Well, it's Remembrance Day in much of the world, and Veterans Day in the U.S., honoring those who served and sacrificed in the armed forces. Vice President Kamala Harris and her husband will join First Lady Dr. Jill Biden for a wreath-laying ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery on Friday. In Australia, the sails of Sydney's famed Opera House were lit up by a projection of poppies during a dawn service. Many Commonwealth countries often remember those who served with the red flowers. I'm Kim Brunhuber. Thanks so much for joining me. Bianca Nobilo and Max Foster will be here in a moment with the latest on the U.S. midterm elections. Please do stay with us.
Live from London, this is CNN Newsroom with Max Foster and Bianca Nobilo.
Welcome to our viewers joining us in the United States and all around the world. I'm Bianca Nobilo.
I'm Max Foster, joining you live from London, ahead on CNN Newsroom.
Here in Maricopa County, the tedious work of democracy continues. Counting the vote, hanging in the balance is control of the U.S. Senate.
Thank you for fighting like the devil to make sure that we had a free and a fair election.
This is actually a 9-month low for annual inflation, and it is a big improvement from the 9% inflation we saw over the summer.
There is not enough money in any country in the world to actually solve this problem.
It's Friday, November the 11th, 9 a.m. here in London, 4 a.m. in Washington, where control of both the Senate and the House of Representatives remains in limbo. The final outcome of the midterm elections undecided now, 3 days later.
Votes are still being counted in two crucial states. Democratic Senator Mark Kelly is expanding his lead over Republican Blake Masters in Arizona, and the same goes for Democrat Katie Hobbs in the high-stakes governor's race. Republican Kari Lake is a die-hard election denier who's already challenging the results.
New numbers in Nevada show Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto narrowing the gap with Republican Adam Laxalt. Now, tens of thousands of ballots remain to be counted there.
Right now, Democrats hold 48 Senate seats. Republicans have 49, just two short of the 51 seats that they need to take Senate control.
In the House, Democrats have won 198 House seats so far. Republicans have 211, 9 short of a majority.
CNN is on the scene in both critical states out west. We'll hear from Gary Tuchman in Las Vegas, Nevada in just a bit, but we begin with Kyung La in Phoenix, Arizona.
Here in Maricopa County, the tedious work of democracy continues. Counting the vote, hanging in the balance is control of the U.S. Senate. Some 78,000 vote results were released this evening by Maricopa County. Didn't really change the races all that much percentage-wise, but the Democrats, who are currently on a razor-thin lead, they got just a bit more vote pad. Now, this is a slow process, and it is a careful process. What we're hearing, though, on the edges are some of the Republicans on this ballot who are frustrated, have been talking about some of these election officials might be doing this on purpose, releasing this slowly on purpose. And we got strong pushback by election officials here.
Quite frankly, it is offensive for Kari Lake to say that these people behind me are slow rolling this when they're working 14 to 18 hours. So I really hope this is the end of that now. We can be patient and respect the results when they come out.
The count continues. The election is not over in Maricopa County. Election officials are looking to start to zoom in on some of those election day ballots. Kyung La, CNN, Phoenix, Arizona.
Here in the largest county in the state of Nevada, Clark County, at the Clark County Election Center, we can tell you that the tabulators are done tabulating for the evening. They will resume on Friday. In these 17 counties in the state of Nevada, the Democratic candidate for Senate, who is an incumbent, the Democratic candidate for governor, who is an incumbent, are making up ground with the counting of mail-in ballots. Tens of thousands of ballots still need to be counted in the state of Nevada, but right now, Catherine Cortez Masto, the Democratic senator, has made up about 7,000 votes today and is now behind her Republican challenger by 8,000 votes. Meanwhile, Governor Steve Sisolak has made up about 7,000 votes and is behind by 27,000 votes. So here in Clark County alone, the largest county in the state, there are at least 50,000 ballots still to count. These are not ballots that were done in person on Election Day. These are ballots that were mailed in or dropped in drop boxes on Election Day. Now, the ballots can come until Saturday. That's the rule here in Nevada. So either way, they would have been counting. They're not counting because it's close. They're counting because that's the law. As long as the ballots are postmarked by Tuesday, they can arrive by Saturday and be counted. So this will continue until at least Saturday. The counting will continue until Saturday, and we still don't know who the winners of these very high-profile races will be. This is Gary Tuckman, CNN in Las Vegas.
Joining us now is Associate Professor of Political Science at University College London, Thomas Gift. Thomas, let's talk about former President Donald Trump and the backlash that we've seen against him. What impact do you think that these midterm elections have had on his future prospects and candidacy?
Well, it's great to be with you. You know, I would say a couple of things. First of all, I really do think that Donald Trump's position in the Republican Party remains very strong among a certain percentage of the population. 30 to 35% of Americans are going to back Trump no matter what. But I do think that among more establishment Republicans, there's really even greater concern and consternation than there was before Tuesday. I think they really want to move past Donald Trump. They're trying to look forward to a different direction for the party. Finding a candidate that has broader electoral appeal and that is not simply focused on galvanizing the base, but they can actually make some inroads with swing voters.
If you look at some of the tabloid front pages in America, Daily News, New York Post, you've also got Fox News anchors coming out in support of DeSantis, effectively, but that's also a negative for Trump. So what do you see happening there, and why is it important?
Well, Ron DeSantis has really been the big story. I mean, in an election in which Republicans underperformed nationally, I think a lot of conservatives are looking to Florida as a beacon to say it didn't have to be this way. Ron DeSantis was able to make such significant inroads into the Latino community, into swing voters, actually flipped a lot of previous Democratic strongholds. You know, Fox News, I think that they are playing to where their audience is, and to the extent that they are seeing where the trend lines are going, it's maybe not surprising, and that's certainly good news for Ron DeSantis.
And so if we consider Florida to be a bit of an anomaly in those respects, do you think that the story of the midterms is one of the Democrats doing better than expected? Because obviously for an incumbent government in his first term, this really isn't bad at all, or the Republicans underperforming?
I really think that it is the Republicans. And the reason that I say that is typically in a midterm election, the president in power and the majority party is not going to do as well. And you had just so many countervailing pressures that look like they were going against Democrats. The highest inflation in 4 decades. Yeah. You had a surge of immigration at the U.S.-Mexico border. All of these kinds of problems, you would have thought that Joe Biden would have had a really bad night. They didn't. And so I really do think ultimately Republicans need to do some soul searching in this postmortem and figure out why they didn't do well. I really do think that it comes down to candidate quality. I think that Republicans just put too many candidates who were election deniers, who had fringe positions. They just did not appeal to moderate voters.
It does feel like we're heading towards deadlock, doesn't it, with if the Republicans do swing the House and then you've got a Democrat president, and we don't know what's going to happen in the Senate. But that system doesn't necessarily work in this situation, does it?
Exactly. I mean, I think gridlock is going to be the watchword on Capitol Hill for the next 2 years. And so even though Democrats didn't do as poorly as they anticipated, it's still the case that if Republicans are able to control the House, they can do a lot of damage and stymie that agenda. I think there are 2 areas that you want to look at. One is in terms of policy. And so I think that Joe Biden's legislative agenda is really dead on arrival. But looking at investigations and just consuming time and winding down the clock, Republicans are really going to, lay it on Joe Biden and his associates, focusing on everything from Hunter Biden's laptop to COVID-19 to charges of a politically motivated Justice Department to even the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And so I think that it's still going to be very difficult for Joe Biden to navigate this new terrain.
Okay. Thomas Gift, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
US stocks posted their best day in over 2 years on Thursday after new government data showed that price increases eased last month.
Investors cheer the news, which could mean that the Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes may finally be getting inflation under control.
The markets all closed well in positive territory. The Dow Jones was up almost 4%, the Nasdaq gained more than 7%, and the S&P 500 closed up 5.5%.
Voters consistently name the economy as their top concern this election, and while Thursday's inflation report was encouraging, experts warn it's just not enough. We'll get the latest now from CNN's Richard Quest in New York.
It is always dubious to take 1 month's numbers and extrapolate it into a trend. But that's what the market is doing today. The welcome news that inflation was down at 7.7%, a long way lower than more than 9% in June, gave the market the view that perhaps the Fed would now slow down in increasing rates. At the next meeting, maybe 50 basis points, possibly even 25 basis points, instead of the 0.75% we've seen so far. That would be perhaps a step too far, because economists, one and all, pretty much agree the Fed is not done yet, that inflation has not been calmed, and what we're seeing with the exuberance of the market could well be washed away in a few days' time. For the moment, everyone knows there's a wall of money waiting to come back in the market, and the first sign of light that inflation may be turning is welcome news indeed, but it's not over yet. Richard Quest, CNN at the New York Stock Exchange.
If you're planning to do your holiday shopping with credit cards, gift giving could cost you more than ever. The Fed's interest rate hikes have driven the average credit card APR up to 19.04%, the highest rate in 30 years. The number has risen by 2.74% points since January, the biggest single-year increase on record.
People looking to buy a home are also feeling the pinch from the Fed's inflation-fighting efforts, with 30-year fixed-rate mortgages back above 7%. That's a dramatic increase from a year ago when the rate stood at something like 2.98%.
The 4% increase has severely compromised buyers' purchasing power by driving up monthly payments. A typical $500,000 home will cost you $1,000 more per month, and that sent home sales dropping for 8 straight months.
Now, a US federal judge has struck down President Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness program. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of 2 borrowers who didn't qualify for debt relief. The Justice Department says it'll appeal the ruling.
Nearly 26 million student loan forgiveness applications have been submitted, but the Biden administration has been banned from cancelling any debt due to a separate legal challenge. Payments on federal student loans have been paused since March 2020 due to a pandemic-related benefit, and they're set to resume in January. President Biden arrives in Egypt in the coming hours for the COP27 summit. But his climate envoy, John Kerry, is already there and speaking with CNN. And we've got a live report for you coming up.
Plus, Hurricane Nicole takes a toll across parts of Florida, destroying homes and leaving thousands without power. And it's not over yet. Hi, Derek.
Yeah, that's right, Max. The remnants of Nicole still churning across the southeast, creating a tornado threat as well as a flash flood threat. I will highlight how this will impact your conditions along the eastern seaboard of the U.S. coming up after the break. Stick around.
At least 2 people have died due to what was Hurricane Nicole. The powerful storm made landfall early Thursday along Florida's east coast.
Dozens of beachfront homes and hotels are being declared unsafe in the wake of the storm. More than 52,000 homes and businesses across the state are still without power.
Nicole has now weakened to a tropical depression, but it's still producing significant rainfall as it moves north.
Let's get the latest from CNN meteorologist Derek Van Dam. Hi, Derek. Where's it moving to next, then?
Yeah, Max, this still churning across the southeastern United States, but I want to take you to Daytona Beach, Florida, where Hurricane Nicole did what Hurricane Ian did, but just basically finishing the job. You remember, Hurricane Ian was from the end of September. It compromised so much of the coastline of the Florida Peninsula. Well, now all we needed was another Category 1 hurricane to come in and erode some of the coastline away, taking and threatening these businesses and these homes. Can you imagine if this was your house falling into the water, sweeping away your priceless memories? Well, that's what residents have had to deal with, and it's all thanks to Hurricane Nicole. There are still coastal flood alerts and advisories in place for both the Big Bend of Florida and the east coast of Florida that extends into the coastline of Georgia as well. Now, here's the remnants of what was Hurricane Nicole, now a tropical depression, churning across central Georgia. And I want you to notice this as well. We still have our tornado watch that's in effect for much of South Carolina. In fact, there's a tornado warning currently for the Florence region that'll expire here within the next 15 minutes. Very typical with these landfalling tropical systems to spin up these brief, weak tornadoes. And that is the threat that we have going forward today. Anywhere you see that shading of yellow, that includes the Mid-Atlantic, a marginal risk for the nation's capital. This is all part of the remnants of Nicole going forward. And believe it or not, would you believe it if I said that it's actually going to merge with a storm system that created a blizzard across the northern sections of the U.S. Bismarck, North Dakota had some impressive snowfall yesterday, several inches reported there. But well, now that energy is going to be absorbed into the remnants of Nicole, and that's going to create a very wet, soggy weekend for much of the eastern third of the country. So if you have travel plans this weekend, double check your flight. D.C., New York, all the way to Syracuse, Pittsburgh, you have the potential for flight delays, certainly some travel headaches on the roadways. This is basically Interstate 95 inland, and we're talking about the potential here for 2 to upwards of 4 inches of rain for some of these areas as the system moves through, combines with what was a winter storm across the upper Midwest. Weather Prediction Center all over this. They have a slight risk of flash flooding for these locations, including Pittsburgh, Charleston, and Syracuse. So the rain will pond up on the roadways quite quickly as this system moves through. We have lots of wind associated as well, so look out for the potential of more power outages. Max, Bianca?
We will. Derek, thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
World leaders are working to address global warming at the United Nations COP27 climate conference in Egypt.
And US President Joe Biden is on his way there right now. He's set to arrive in the coming hours. Mr. Biden will meet with Egypt's president and deliver remarks about the importance of continuing the fight against climate change. CNN has reporters there on the ground in Sharm el-Sheikh. We're joined now live by White House reporter Kevin Liptak, also senior international correspondent David McKenzie. Thank you to you both. Kevin, there's going to be all eyes really on the US president because it's one of the biggest emitters, of course, the United States. He has committed billions of dollars to help countries develop clean energy, but is he going to be able to deliver that after the midterms?
Yeah, well, certainly President Biden feels like he's coming into this conference with a lot to talk about. And remember, it was only a year ago that the president arrived to last year's climate summit in Scotland, just as his climate provisions were all falling apart in Congress. So the difference a year has made is significant. The president has $370 billion included in a domestic spending bill that goes towards combating climate change. That's the largest investment in American history. And so the president, when he speaks later today, will try and use that as leverage to try and convince other leaders to make similarly ambitious pledges to spend money in their countries to combat climate change. He'll also talk about some new proposed rules about government contractors cutting carbon emissions, some new methane rules. What the White House says is that the president will call on leaders to keep their eye on the ball, stay focused. But there is a dilemma here that a lot of other foreign leaders are focused on something else at this summit, which is the issue of climate reparations. Essentially, they are calling on wealthy nations like the United States, one of the top emitters, to pay up for the damage that's being done in some of these low-income countries when it comes to floods, fires, other extreme events that are due to climate change. Now, that is not really politically feasible, even before the midterm elections. If Republicans do take control of one or more chambers of Congress, this is really the last major piece of climate legislation. We wouldn't expect that to happen in the next 2 years. And we did see the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, she is also here in Sharm el-Sheikh. Speaking yesterday, she said that when it comes to climate change, many Republicans still believe that it's a hoax. And we will hear more from her later today. And so that really is kind of the dilemma that the president is confronting as he embarks on this around the world trip. Of course, his message on all of these trips is that America is back, it's resuming its commitments, and certainly the biggest threat to that is President Trump, and it does appear to be politically weakened right now. But on the other hand, if Republicans the Senate, much of the president's agenda would be stalled. And so that is kind of the dynamic. The president's aides say he is heading into this trip with the wind at his back. They say he feels confident heading into this around the world trip. But certainly that dynamic will be at play while he's on the ground here for a few hours in Egypt. Max and Bianca.
And with President Biden set to touch down in the coming hours, David McKenzie, who's also at the summit for us, you've been getting some insights into America's expectations and objectives at the summit too.
Well, that's right, Bianca. And of course, you know, climate change isn't a hoax. It is a huge catastrophe for the planet, and we are behind the curve. President Biden, as Kevin said, will try to show U.S. leadership. One way that the U.S. government has announced it's trying to help developing countries is to announce a carbon offset program. That has come under some level of criticism because people say that if companies can offset their carbon, then they won't make the tough choices to reduce emissions themselves. I put the question to the chief climate envoy of the U.S., Secretary John Kerry. Here's what he had to say.
Once the rules get fully worked out and everybody's in a comfort place, hopefully this will be implemented because we desperately need the money. There is not enough money in any country in the world to actually solve this problem. It takes trillions, and no government that I know of is ready to put trillions into this on an annual basis. That's what the scientists and the UN finance reports say we must do. 2.5 to 4.5 trillion every year for the next 30 years.
Well, here's the problem, Max and Bianca. Climate change won't be solved at the margins. It will be solved with big, sweeping, dynamic changes to the way that we run industry, the way that governments do business in every aspect of every country all over the planet. Right now, the evidence is such that that isn't happening at these climate meetings, despite the calls from scientists and activists. Whether the talk can move into action, I'm skeptical that will happen in the short term, but we will see if President Biden can help show U.S. leadership, at least, on this issue, and whether the tough choices will actually be made by leaders in the coming months. Bianca,
We
Max?
shall see. David McKenzie and Kevin Liptak, thank you both so much.
Now, after leaving the COP27 in Egypt, President Biden heads to Cambodia for the ASEAN summit and then on to the G20 in Bali, where he's set to meet with China's Xi Jinping for the first time since taking the White House. We'll go live to Beijing for a preview coming up in about 20 minutes from now.
A new study estimates that a virus called RSV is responsible for 1 in 50 deaths among children under the age of 5 worldwide. The virus is common around the globe, but is currently surging in the United States. It's especially dangerous for premature and medically fragile babies, but can cause problems for otherwise healthy children too. Globally, RSV is the second leading cause of death during the first year of a child's life after malaria.
Now, many key races have yet to be called in the US midterm elections, but it's already been an historic election, really, for the Biden administration. We'll speak about it with a presidential historian when we return.
Plus, Ukraine's first couple speak exclusively with CNN about finding the motivation to keep on fighting.
Welcome back to CNN Newsroom. I'm Max Foster. If you're just joining us, do let me bring you up to date with the top stories this hour. Control of the US Congress still up in the air as vote counting continues into the weekend across several states. Republicans seem to be close to taking the House with a majority, but it may take weeks to decide the Senate with a crucial runoff race set for next month in Georgia.
So let's take a look at the historical importance of this midterm not being a red wave. Most of the time, the sitting president's party loses ground in midterm elections. History certainly seems adamant that the opposing party will win the national popular vote for the US House and gain seats there. But as with any rule, there are exceptions. So let's look back at some of the key shifts against previous presidents during the midterms. Now, according to data from the Brookings Institution, in 1994, here, President Clinton lost 54 seats to the Republicans under what was called a revolution. Now, who could forget in 2010 when President Obama lost a whopping 63 seats to the Republicans as the Tea Party handed the Democrats a shellacking, as you say, across the pond. Now, speaking to Democratic campaign workers on Thursday, President Biden said this midterm defied history and the pundits. Take a listen.
Here's what we do know. We lost fewer seats in the House of Representatives than any Democratic president's first elected midterm, at least 40 years. We had the best midterms for governors since 1986. And experts said we couldn't beat the odds, but we did beat the odds.
Joining us now from New York is CNN presidential historian Tim Naftali. He teaches history and public service at New York University and is the former director of the Nixon Presidential Library. Thank you so much for joining us. It's for the likes of you to decide, how this election will go down in history. Where would you place it?
Well, it's a reminder of the extraordinary times that we live in. A president has not done this well in his first midterm since George W. Bush after 9/11 or John F. Kennedy after the Cuban Missile Crisis. President Biden's polling numbers, his personal popularity was so low and inflation was so high that most analysts assumed, and the Republican Party assumed, that there would be a red wave, that the Republicans would not only take over the House, but they would win 30 to 40 seats at least, and that they would take over the Senate. And they may still take over the Senate, and if they do, it'll be 51-49, but we're not there yet. And yes, they'll probably take the House, but they might only have a majority of 4 or 5 seats. So what has happened here is the American people have shown that they are moved by issues other than inflation, that the Supreme Court decision in Dobbs, which made abortion illegal throughout the lands, a federal issue. It's now up to the states to determine. That has had an enormous effect in getting out the vote for the president's party. The reason that midterms generally spell bad news for a president is that his party, someday hers, his party is not as energized to get out to vote. And that's why, first of all, Americans don't usually vote in large numbers in midterms. This particular midterm, we saw record numbers of people voting in a midterm in the battleground states. That was unusual. It's because in this case, there are issues that are motivating Democrats to vote. Dobbs, dislike of Trump, concerns about democracy, that many pollsters underestimated when they were thinking about what would have happened or what was going to happen on Tuesday.
Tim, lots more to ask you. If we could just ask you to kindly stand by for a second, because we have some breaking news out of Ukraine. CNN has just arrived in a Ukrainian town that's been liberated from Russian troops over the past 48 hours. And Nick Robertson joins us now from Shinhurivka, Ukraine. First time I'm seeing that. He's currently the only journalist reporting from there. Nick, tell us about where you are and what's happening right now.
It's quite incredible. Everyone's telling us we are the first reporters here. Literally, the Ukrainian troops only arrived here yesterday and liberated the town. The Russians left 2 days before. As you drive into the town here, everyone's waving. Everyone's happy. People talk to here have horror stories to tell about their treatment by the Russians, particularly over the last few days. I'll give you an idea of what you're seeing behind me. You see a couple of young teenagers here with the Ukrainian flags on their shoulders. They were the first to raise the flag when the Russians left, even before the troops arrived. So sort of a pre-liberation by teenagers here. And they tell us that a month ago somebody had been shot here, shot and killed for raising a Ukrainian flag. And in the middle of the crowd here, everyone's gathered. We're sort of in the center of the town, outside the administrative buildings here. That's the regional governor. He's just visiting here. He's just arrived in the last few minutes. He's explaining to people how they're going to get support from the Ukrainian government in the coming days, that they're going to be bringing humanitarian aid, supplies and support into the town here. And the situation for people here is really difficult. There's no electricity, there's no gas. So they've had a very difficult time just in terms of surviving under the Russians. But what's happened in this town over the past few days, the past couple of weeks, as the Russians knew that they were going to pull out, there was widespread looting, vehicles looted. We've been to the bank here. It's completely ransacked and looted. The police station here, we're told, was used as a base of torture, that people would be taken in here and tortured. And if they wanted to extract more information, then they would take them the 45 kilometers on to Kherson. I spoke to a young girl here, and I'm telling you a lot of things here because everybody wants to talk. Everyone you speak to at the roadside here wants to talk. This young lady, 15 years old, she told me, her mother confirmed her story, that in the last few days of the Russians being here, she was taken away, kidnapped, a hood put over her head. She told us she was afraid of being raped. She was only released yesterday. This is a town that is only just now getting to grips with the idea of liberation, of what it means to be free, of what it means not to have Russian rule here. And I think people are in awe of it. We've seen people on the streets meeting friends they haven't seen for a long time, hugging each other in tears. But I think also there's a sense of, okay, what's going to happen now? We're free and we're liberated. And I want to give you a slightly bigger sense of the town, away from the crowd in the city here. Just follow me out to the road here if we can do this. This is a very small town, and one of the things you notice here is that there are very few cars on the road. Look just down the street here, and if you can see, that's sort of looking into town here. There are very few cars because the Russians looted so many of them. That's what people here are telling us. There are some army soldiers around, but mostly what we're seeing is that the troops are pushing forward. This area is liberated, and they're now moving more towards Kherson. I think what we're going to see here is going to be replicated through these areas as Ukrainian forces move in and liberate them here. I'd love to be able to talk more with the people in the crowd here on camera with you, but very few people here speak particularly good English for me to interview them. But the conversations that we've had here, people at the side of the road, is relief, is the sense that they are free again, and wanting to tell us the difficult times that they had under the Russians. Another lady we stopped to talk to in the market was literally in tears. She just didn't know what to say about having the fears lifted from her of possibly being picked up on the street. So it's really, for people here now, really just a sense of relief and coming to terms with a new reality.
It's incredible to see the reaction there, isn't it? It says so much about the situation where the loyalties continue to lie there. But what are your thoughts?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. People are just genuinely, I mean, it's rare that you walk into a town and people are genuinely so happy to see you. I mean, you do become overwhelmed with the situation, the sadness, but the happiness too. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Everyone's so pleased and happy. This is a new time and a new chapter for them.
How quickly do you think you'll be moving, Nick? It seems to us, obviously, we only tell people when you arrive in these places not what your plans are, but it does seem as though the military are moving very quickly towards Kherson. Is your feeling that they're into Kherson now?
We understand that they're moving carefully and cautiously. We travelled along roads here through checkpoints, or past checkpoints with blown out military vehicles with mortar shells, large mortar shells, scattered among the military vehicles. So even the roads in and out of here, they've clearly also been mined in the past. Those mines have been removed. But really this population here can't sort of yet really connect safely with the rest of Ukraine. They're still sort of isolated here. So I think you'll see the military come back and make the roads into here more secure. But right now, yes, they are focused. And we saw a lot of troops this morning in small groups moving out, going further down the road. So I think what you are going to see them is moving further and further towards Kherson as they try to take control there.
I'm just looking, Nick, at that, the smiling faces behind you. What's life been like for them then in recent months? What must this feel like to them?
Well, it's been one of exceptional uncertainty because they've been very, very close to the front line. Some of the city has been damaged through shelling, but not much. There's been the uncertainty about food supplies coming in. This is one of the things Russians have said about Kherson, that they couldn't get adequate food supplies in. And of course, people here relied on those supplies. The market, the shops, we've only seen one shop that was open. And the rest, the other place for people to buy food is literally stalls at the side of the road. But they're not sort of market stalls as you and I would know them, perhaps in England or Paris or wherever. They are just benches with a few products on for people to buy. So it's been very tough. But it's clear when you speak to people how emotionally difficult it's been to not know if you're going to be taken away for questioning and possible torture. And that has happened, we're told. That has happened to a lot of people here, that they have been taken away. And some of them haven't come back. So there's been this uncertainty here for people. I think that perhaps, that uncertainty under the Russians, and what they say happened in the last 2 weeks was when the Russians realized they were leaving, they brought in, there were Chechens who came in, people have told us here, the level of violence to the population went up, the level of looting went up. So the past couple of weeks, when it looked like the Ukrainian forces were going to come in, have been exceptionally precarious. And when one tries to put oneself in the position that people here must have gone through, of not knowing if they were going to be safe, if when they went out to get some bread or whatever they did, that they were going to be able to get back home. And these are the experiences people are sharing with us here. That level of uncertainty has just worn on people. And there's a relief here, but I'm not sure that people here they know that they're free, but it's still very muted. This is still a very quiet place. I think there's a lot of emotions that are still suppressed here, Max.
Okay, Nick, thank you so much. And you can only imagine what's going through their minds, can't you?
Yeah, the best we can do is just seeing the looks on their faces, which is quite incredible to see Nick there and how delighted they are to be able to share their relief and their joy with him and with whoever's watching.
And the history for that area. Something you only get on CNN, those moments when we're pushing forward with the military and opening up these areas. So we'll be back with Nick throughout the day.
Welcome back. We want to bring our guest, CNN presidential historian Tim Naftali, back on the midterm elections. We were speaking to him just before we went to Nick Robertson on the ground outside Kherson. Tim, let me ask you, because one of the main arguments that the Democrats were pushing in these midterms was the fact that democracy itself was on the ballot. It was in peril. From the sort of longitudinal historical perspective, was that true?
Well, what we've seen is a huge turnout in many of the battleground states, and it shows that both parties wanted to participate in the democratic process. The concern for many Democrats and others was that the election deniers, these are people who believe that the 2020 election actually was won by Donald Trump and not by Joe Biden, that those deniers would win. Some of them did win, but most of them have not done well in the positions that might affect future elections. So in many ways, democracy did extraordinarily well, not only by the participation of people, but by the fact that election deniers who could have been very powerful in certain states lost on Tuesday.
In terms of what's going to happen now, we were talking a bit earlier about this deadlock that will effectively happen in Washington if the Republicans take the House, but also if they take the Senate as well. What does that mean for the wider world? Does that mean that big decisions just won't be taken which will affect the world?
If the Senate stays with the Democrats, I think we can expect the U.S. commitment to the war in Ukraine to continue. The House is going to be a problem for the president, regardless of the size of the mandate that the Republicans get. But let's put it to for the world, the fact that Donald Trump and Trumpists and election deniers did not do as well as they expected is a good sign for those who are worried about extreme nationalism around the world. Trumpism is now under some pressure by Republicans in the United States because this midterm should have been a cakewalk for Republicans, and it wasn't. So I think for the world, the weakening of Donald Trump is an excellent sign. Joe Biden has his challenges ahead of him, but he will still face a much easier Congress to deal with than we expected on Tuesday.
And Tim, like you said, as far as the Republicans are concerned, perhaps should have been a cakewalk. One state, which seemed to be anomalous when we look at the midterms, was Florida. And Ron DeSantis is really like roaring into the public consciousness globally as well. People are starting to pay attention to him. In terms of electability and looking ahead to 2024, when we look at DeSantis, he's Yale, Harvard educated, military background, family man, perhaps a more acceptable face of certain Trumpist values. What do you think his chances are at becoming the nominee?
Well, his chances are much better than they were before Tuesday. He's not a very charismatic man. I'm not sure that he will excite voters in the same way that Donald Trump did on the right. But what's very important now is to see the extent to which Trump and DeSantis go head to head. Donald Trump has been acting like DeSantis is his main opponent. DeSantis has not been acting as if Trump was his main opponent. DeSantis was focused on winning big in Florida. Over the next few weeks, we'll see how DeSantis starts to play the game. If big donors move towards DeSantis, I'm talking about Republican donors, that's going to make 2024 much more interesting. So a lot of important stuff is going to happen behind the scenes. Let's see where the money goes.
And the momentum. Tim Naftali, thank you so much for joining us and for getting up early.
We'll be back in just a moment.
My pleasure.
After a nearly 20-year quest, an archaeologist believes she may be close to locating the lost tomb of Egyptian Queen Cleopatra. Kathleen Martinez tells CNN her team uncovered tunnels beneath an Egyptian temple that led to the Mediterranean Sea and sunken structures. And she says her excavation revealed a collection of coins portraying Cleopatra and Alexander the Great, a huge religious center, and more than 1,500 objects, busts, statues, and golden pieces. And now, I mean, everyone wants this to be true.
Yes, it would be the archaeological discovery of the 21st century.
Why?
I think. Well, we're 100 years on from the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, so this would be the next big one. Because the death of Cleopatra is legendary. Supposedly she committed suicide by snake bite. Experts are skeptical. In her own mausoleum with her lover,
Only for
Mark
talking
Antony.
to herself.
Yes,
Her topic.
but it could be big news, so stay tuned for that.
Thanks for joining us here on CNN Newsroom. I'm Max Foster.
And I'm Bianca Noblo, amateur archaeologist. CNN This Morning with Don Lemon, Poppy Harlow, and Caitlin Collins is next. Whether you're ready or not, here we go.
They were like, hey, heads up, happy Friday.
You're on TV.
Wake up, anchors. Speak, people. That's what happens in the studio. You guys have no idea, so we're explaining. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It is Friday.
TGIF, people.
Amen.
Friday, and it's been a big election week. It's the Friday after the election. Congress is still undecided on Friday. The election happened on Tuesday. We have results out of Arizona to tell you about in the Senate race there. Today, Maricopa, Arizona's most populous county, is set to start releasing the first results of outstanding ballots. Where they're coming from, we're live on the ground in Phoenix.
Also, an average governor, that's a quote. Also, this quote, lack of loyalty. Donald Trump tearing into Florida's governor, Ron DeSantis, and claiming credit for DeSantis' sudden rise. This is just days before Trump's, quote, big announcement that he'll make Tuesday night at Mar-a-Lago.
And it's a high-stakes meeting on the backdrop of Russia's war in Ukraine and growing tensions over Taiwan. We'll tell you what's on the table between President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping when they sit down face-to-face in just a matter of days.
But we're going to start with what is a slow drip. New vote totals are trickling in from Maricopa County. Let's start now with Josh Campbell. Josh, he is live in Maricopa County at the Election Center, by the way. Good morning to you. Josh, do you have any news for us? What can we expect this next wave of votes that are supposed to drop?
Yeah, good morning to you, Don. Very slowly, votes are being counted here behind me here in Maricopa County. This is the Central Voting Center. We did get a new batch of votes released last night, about 80,000 new votes. That didn't really move the needle that much on these two key races that we've been looking at. Of course, the race for the U.S. Senate, Mark Kelly up just about 115,000 votes over venture capitalist Blake Masters. In the gubernatorial race, that is a lot narrower in that margin. We're seeing here Katie Hobbs, the Secretary of State, up just about 27,000 votes over Kari Lake. There are still about 540,000 votes left to be counted, and that includes 290,000 votes that voters actually dropped off on Election Day. They received their ballots by mail, but for whatever reason, maybe they didn't know exactly who they were going to vote for. Maybe they decided it was more secure to actually hand it to an election official, but that is going to take some time. Officials here haven't given us a specific deadline when they expect to have all of the votes counted, but of course, all eyes here on the state, Don.
And what about the candidates? Because you know they've got to be nervous. Are they saying anything?
They are. I mean, as is expected, we're hearing optimism from essentially all four of those candidates that I just mentioned, saying that they believe in the end they will come out on top. But it's specifically comments from Kari Lake, the Republican candidate for governor here, that is actually drawing the ire of election officials. She has described this process as possibly being deliberately slow-rolled for political purposes, that causing officials here to speak out. Take a listen.
Quite frankly, it is offensive for Kari Lake to say that these people behind me are slow rolling this when they're working 14 to 18 hours. So I really hope this is the end of that now. We can be patient and respect the results when they come out.
So it's ironic to us that people who are calling, into question the integrity of this election and want faster results don't understand that it's actually those processes that add the integrity to our election process.
And of course, Bill Gates, who was the head of the Maricopa County elections, he's a Republican, and he is furious at these claims that somehow these officials are acting politically in this process. They continue to say it takes time to count these votes. But of course, it's those conspiracy theories that's the reason, Don, that this building behind me is surrounded, even at this hour, by sheriff's deputies. That's something that has become quite commonplace here in this modern era of conspiracy theories, that officials that are coming to count votes, including volunteers who are just volunteering their time to help with the election process, they have to have heavy security because of these conspiracy theories, Don.
And they're working really, really hard to try to get everything done in a timely fashion. So patience, patience, patience. Thank you, Josh Campbell. Appreciate it.
Good for Bill Gates speaking out like that. It's important for people of power to do that. Let's go to Nevada. Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto is closing the gap on her Republican challenger, Adam Laxalt. On the House side, MAGA Republican Lauren Boebert of Colorado is fighting to hold on to her seat as the GOP inches closer to control of that chamber. Our senior data reporter, Harry Enton, is here with the totals. Good morning, Harry.
Good morning.
What can you tell us? Let's start with Nevada.
Well, first let's just zone out a little bit and give you the idea. Democrats need to pick up 2 Senate seats to get the majority, right? They're up in Arizona. Let's go into Nevada, which could be the second one. What do we got here? We got Adam Laxalt up by a point, but as you were hinting at in your read, this margin has been closing. Catherine Cortez Masto was once down about 3 points. She's now down just about 1. Let's go down south, southern part of the state, Clark County. This margin now, 6 points. The presidential race back 2 years ago, it was 9, but it was 5 points when we spoke yesterday. As more mail votes have come in from Clark County, which is the home to Las Vegas, Catherine Cortez Masto's vote total has gone up. She has closed the gap with Adam Laxalt. We'll also go up here to Reno, to Washoe County. A few days ago, Adam Laxalt was ahead here. Now Catherine Cortez Masto, as more mail votes have got counted, she's up by 3. There are tens of thousands of mail votes still out. I would not be surprised if she continues to close, and eventually jumps out ahead. Now, it's also a gubernatorial race in the state of Nevada. Right here, Joe Lombardo, the Republican, has a somewhat larger lead than Adam Laxalt. It's a 3-point advantage. This margin may hold even if the Senate margin flips. This could be another state where we sort of have this split ticket voting, right, where there's just enough people out there and just enough independents in the electorate who say, you know what, I'm going to choose a Republican gubernatorial candidate, and maybe I'm going to go Democratic for Senate.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and watch and see what happens. But right now in Nevada, it's looking better for the Democrats on the Senate side than the gubernatorial side.
The splitting of tickets this election has been fascinating. Let's talk about the House, Harry. First of all, just sort of broadly, people waking up this morning, where do Democrats stand, where do Republicans stand? And then you've got to tell us what the numbers are in that race in Colorado, Lauren Boebert's race.
Yeah, so let's start off on sort of this broad view of the House, right? Right now, Republicans in the call race is 211 to Democrats 198. If we look at the seats in which they're ahead, right, this includes some uncalled races, Republicans lead in 222 seats to Democrats 213. I think there's a question as to whether or not the Democrats could actually take the lead in some of those uncalled races where they currently trail. I just want to go into California for a quick second and give you an idea of how many votes there still are to be counted. So David Valadao in this district, California's 22nd, is up by about 9 percentage points, or between 8 and 9 percentage points. But look how much of the estimated vote is reporting. It's just 32%. It's just 32%. There's 2/3 of the vote still to be counted there. Who knows? That race might flip. Or how about here, where John Durante is up by a little, well less than a point. Look at that. Just 44% of the vote is reported. So don't be surprised if some of these California races flip. I'm not saying that they will, but I'm just saying that there's plenty of room for Democrats in those races. Finally, you know, we'll just go into Colorado here. We'll go into the Lauren Boebert district. Yesterday, she was trailing, but look now. She has a slight advantage, 99% of the vote, and I'm not sure there's enough out there for Boebert to lose her lead, but still, one incredibly close race, a close race that nobody thought would be close.
You know when they say every vote counts?
This election proves it, right? Every vote counts. Folks, if you didn't vote, I don't know what to tell you.
Don't complain. All right, Harry, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, fresh off his re-election win in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis is under attack from former President Trump, who is unloading on the governor that he said he voted for on Tuesday and, of course, once endorsed. Now Trump says, quote, Ron DeSanctimonious is playing games. The fake news asks him if he's going to run if President Trump runs. And he says, quote, I'm only focused on the governor's race. I'm not looking into the future. Well, in terms of loyalty and class, that's not really the right answer. Trump obviously also taking credit for DeSantis' win in 2018. He said Ron was going down 10,000 votes a day. I sent in the FBI and U.S. attorneys. And the ballot theft immediately ended, of course, referring to what happened in 2018 with the vote count in Florida. But to talk about what is actually happening now is CNN senior political analyst and CNN and senior editor at The Atlantic, Ron Brownstein.
Good morning, gang.
Morning.
If you
I like your election outfit.
Thank
still,
you.
red,
Yeah,
white, and blue.
yeah.
If you've been speaking to people in Trump's orbit, none of this is a surprise. This has all been happening behind the scenes. It's just now bursting out into the public because Ron DeSantis cruised to victory, to re-election on Tuesday.
You know, in polls, they've been asking whether you are a supporter of Donald Trump or a supporter of the Republican Party. Donald Trump is a supporter of Donald Trump, not the Republican Party. I mean, the idea that he would take really the biggest Republican victory of Tuesday night was the magnitude of DeSantis' win in Florida, and immediately, you know, turn it into about him and attacking DeSantis is kind of an indication of what the party has ahead if they move on from him. Look, I think running against there is nothing in American politics that can prepare you for running against Donald Trump. You know, we saw Donald Trump break Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz in a way that they still seem broken politically to him. I think that, you know, Ron DeSantis is getting an early look at what it will. I mean, it's the Mike Tyson rule. Everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. And I think that on paper, there's a lot of reasons for DeSantis to be optimistic about his ability to challenge Trump in 2024, but you've got to do it every day, and this is a reminder of what it's going to be like.
No one knows that better than DeSantis, though, I will say.
But is it different now? I mean, I love when you write about the Mike Tyson rule, and I think you're right. I mean, just human nature is different than, you know, what your resume looks like or what's on paper. But is it different now with all of these Republicans, not all Republicans, but a number of big-name Republicans and publications, media walking away from Trump? does his punch still carry the same weight?
So let's do the ledger. On the positive side for DeSantis, there's no question the elites of the party, especially after Tuesday, are ready for an alternative to Trump. 60% of voters in the exit poll said they had an unfavorable view of Trump, and that was in an electorate that is going to be more Republican than the electorate will be in 2024. And he's at a 60% negative there. There's clearly infinite money for a Ron DeSantis run. But there are two big problems for anyone to beat Trump. One is that the rules in the Republican primary the Republican primaries are fought under different rules than the Democrats. And the Republicans really advantage whoever has the biggest block, even if it's not a majority. And Trump has a very loyal base. In 2016, Poppy, he was the presumptive Republican nominee. He had pulled away from the field before he won 50% in any state. He had only won about 40% of the vote. And the other problem is that the base in the party that is resistant to Trump are college-educated Republicans. They were resistant in 2016. He only won about 35% of them. Continue to be resistant now. Can anyone unify them against him?
Okay.
Two big
I'm going to
questions.
be the skunk at the garden party. Cynically and not cynically. Why do we care? When I saw this Donald Trump thing and Ron DeSantis, I was at dinner. I was just like, ugh.
Yeah.
It's
what you're going to be living with for 2 years.
I think most people feel the same way.
Yeah.
It's just like, I think Donald Trump would be standing at the edge of the ocean, screaming into the ocean. To Poppy's point, he doesn't have the New York Post. He doesn't seem to have all the Rupert Murdoch things. He doesn't seem to have Fox News. Conservative media is turning against him. The only people who are talking about him are us. I think the average person is like, I'm sick of Donald Trump's BS, and their eyes just kind of glaze over. So why do we care?
Well, the question is...
That's a serious question. I'm being cynical, but that is a serious question.
I totally... Obviously, the movement in kind of elite conservative circles after 2022 is going to be, they don't think Donald Trump can win. I mean, if you look at what happened, we talked about this the other day, Caitlin. I mean, you look at what happened to his candidates in the key states that made Joe Biden president. 5 states flipped from 2016 to 2020, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Trump nominees did pretty poorly across the board.
You're giving me all the technical stuff, Ron. I'm just saying we're giving him his power.
No, but no.
You don't think we give him the power?
No, because
otherwise...
there is still a formidable base in the party that is with him, and that is the power.
Look at the primaries.
That is, right, exactly. The fact that his candidates were able to win, and that has always been what has intimidated and made Republicans.
He's not there yet, Ron. He's not even said he's going to run. We don't know if he's going to run.
Well,
why can't we
Tuesday
save
night
this?
at 9 o'clock.
Why don't we save this until he says, I'm going to run?
Yeah.
I feel like when we do this, it's, again, like 2016. This is the equivalent of saying, Donald Trump is about to hold a rally. Let's put a camera on it and hold it and see what happens. Why don't we hold the camera, talk about things that are actually happening now, and when Donald Trump says, I'm going to run, then this actually becomes real, instead of like giving him his power and doing exactly what he wants us to do, because he doesn't have Twitter. He's losing the other thing, so...
Maybe none of us
He will soon have Twitter if Twitter stays around.
Right.
For now. I know.
Yeah.
And then a minute later, he'll say, I'm running, and I'll be like, let's bring Ron Brownstein back.
By the way, there are a lot of Republicans who would like to exactly be in that space.
Yeah.
But he is signaling to them, I think, that he is not going to go quietly if he goes at all.
Yeah. I'm a little cranky after the election, so only because of the hours and the morning. But, you know, hey.
But we love having you on.
Thanks, Ron. Good to see you.
Good to see you guys.
Ron, thank you.
Thank you. There's another setback for the president's student loan forgiveness plan. A Trump-appointed federal judge striking it down. So what is the next move for the Biden administration?
Yeah, this is a really interesting case. Also, an ultimatum, essentially, from Elon Musk to Twitter employees and a warning about difficult times ahead. Welcome back to CNN This Morning. Another blow this morning for more than 26 million borrowers hoping for student debt relief through the president's forgiveness program. This is after a Trump-appointed federal judge in Texas has ruled that the policy violates the Constitution, that it's illegal. Arlette Saenz joins us now. So walk us through sort of the judge's argument here. The way I read it is it's an overstep here. You don't have this power, Mr. President. And then I think more importantly, what it means for all these folks who thought they were going to get this relief.
Yeah, good morning, Poppy. Well, this federal judge down in Texas ruled that the president's student loan forgiveness program is unlawful and must be vacated. He argued, that judge, that 2003 law that the White House has used to justify the enactment of the program doesn't actually authorize them to create it. And he further argued, quote, "In this country, we are not ruled by an all-powerful executive with a pen and a phone. Instead, we are ruled by a constitution that provides for three distinct and independent branches of government." Now, it's important to note that this student debt relief program had already been on hold, on a temporary hold, as there were other cases being considered. But certainly this is another setback for the administration.
It's expected that this will likely reach the Supreme Court. Whether they take it up, that's another question. But I wonder what the White House is saying this morning.
Well, the White House last night issued a statement saying they strongly disagree with the decision, and the Justice Department acted very quickly to file an appeal. But even as this program has been on hold, the White House has noted that 26 million people have applied for this program, and they've already approved 16 million borrowers' applications. Karine Jean-Pierre, the press secretary, saying, quote, "The department will hold on to their information so it can quickly process their relief once we prevail in court." So the White House and President Biden has made clear that he thinks this will stand up in court. But let's not forget that out on the campaign trail over the course of the past few weeks, the president was touting this plan as one of the ways he could offer economic relief to millions of Americans. But now those borrowers, the student loan borrowers, remain in limbo.
It's the people, millions of them hanging in the balance. Arlette, thank you for the reporting from Washington.
So this is being called Twitter's moment, a titanic moment for Twitter, I should say. In just 2 weeks since Elon Musk took control of the social media giant, he has fired half of Twitter's employees, some by mistake, many of them sued. He cracked down on users impersonating him. He wants to charge people, I should say, for a blue check mark. And now he is telling employees Twitter could face bankruptcy, and he is declaring an end to remote work. That's a lot. Mark Stewart is here, CNN correspondent. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Look, I'll ask you what, this is Poppy's expertise because she knows him.
Elon Musk is my,
well,
I wish I could understand.
Him before, so you
this
have more insight into this. Yeah. But just for people who are using social media and who are using Twitter, people at home are saying, what's in it for me, or what's going to happen to my Twitter? What does this mean for me?
And the workers.
Yeah.
And the workers. Let's just say big question mark, because when you were just reading that introduction, I was getting out of breath. It's a lot to take in. But really, despite this very high-profile CEO, now owner, despite some of the antics that we have seen, Twitter is no different than any other tech company right now. It is competing for eyeballs. And what I mean by that, there are a lot of offerings on the digital landscape right now. And we have seen this competition. Facebook earlier this week talked about layoffs because it's hard to get people on the platform. It's hard to get advertisers. It's no different, really, than the challenges that Peloton has had to get people to sign up. I mean, that's a digital platform as well. So I think Twitter is in that same space.
I just think, I hear you, but I think there are two distinct things that are different than Twitter. Three. One, advertisers are scared because of the misinformation and increased hate speech, so why would they put their company there? B, Musk didn't actually want to buy this company in the end. He was contractually obliged to. And I was thinking about it, guys. Elon Musk has never run a company before that he didn't found or co-found. PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX, the Boring Company. It's different to parachute in.
Well, and that's perhaps one reason why we're seeing this kind of clearing of the Titanic, if you will. I think that the real question is where is he going to take it? I mean, that's the question we're all wondering, where is he going to take it? And maybe he is going to be an innovator again. He's talked a lot about making Twitter this X platform, as he calls it. And what he means by it, in Asia, for example, there's a very popular app called WeChat. Not only can you have like these discussions that you have on Twitter, but you can video message with your friends there. You can go shopping there. So if he wants to make his mark and do something innovative, maybe that's where he's going. I also find it curious, as you said.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Couldn't he have done that without Twitter? Couldn't he have just created a platform himself without Twitter to do that instead of taking on all that debt and then trying to parachute in, as you said? Because a lot of people, it's common to parachute into companies and you think it's easy, and then most people find out it's not so easy, right?
But here's what Twitter has that something starting from the ground up may not have: analytics. And what I mean by analytics, Twitter knows exactly when people are logging on, from where, what are they looking at, and what is the attention span.
So that's what he bought.
I think that's what makes this platform attractive. That's already established.
But the big question is Twitter even going to exist? Because, you know, Oliver Darcy did a great job in his newsletter about this, but he said Musk is already floating the possibility that Twitter could collapse, saying in his first all-staff email that he warned the economic picture ahead is dire, and without significant subscription revenue, there's a good chance Twitter does not survive the upcoming economic downturn.
I think that's a very valid point, but I'm going to go back to this whole notion of analytics. I mean, it still has some value and it still has some worth. So maybe, even though it may not exist in its current form, there will be pieces of it that he will perhaps be able to sell off that would have some value.
Did he need to pay $44 billion for those analytics?
No, he tried not to.
Isn't everything inflated in price these days?
Oh my gosh, even Twitter.
Look, it's hard to value a tech platform right now. It's still relatively new phenomenon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right, the first high-stakes sit-down is set between President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping next week. We'll tell you what to expect and what Biden might be able to get out of that meeting.
Also, this just in, we are getting word that Russian troops are right now leaving Kherson in a major win for Ukrainians.
No matter how much Baku tries to explain to me the business model of Twitter, I don't understand.
President Biden is set to hold his first face-to-face meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping since he took office, as world leaders are heading to Indonesia for the G20 summit. The high-stakes sit-down comes in the shadow of Russia's war on Ukraine, North Korea's recent missile tests, and tensions over Taiwan, increasing tensions over Taiwan. CNN's Selena Wang joins us live from Beijing. Selena, this meeting is going to be so closely watched because the buildup has been so intense here. And I know the White House has said they're really just trying to get a sense of where his red lines are. Biden has said he's not going to make any concessions in this meeting. What do you expect is on the table from the Chinese side?
Yeah, Caitlin, I mean, this is high stakes, but no breakthroughs expected here. The U.S. said so themselves, that they're just trying to build a floor so that this relationship doesn't tip over into conflict. The two men, they do have a history. Biden said many times before that they know each other well, but there are just too many fundamental differences here for one face-to-face meeting to solve that. Now, the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, said, quote, the leaders will discuss efforts to maintain and deepen lines of communication between the United States and the PRC, responsibly manage competition, and work together where interests align. So on the table here is Taiwan, the war in Ukraine, concerns around human rights in China, possibly also areas where they could cooperate, like on climate change in North Korea. But going into this meeting, there is just so much mutual distrust. America has labeled China, the Biden administration, as America's most consequential geopolitical challenge, whereas Beijing sees Washington as trying to contain and suppress its rise. The most recent example they point to are those sweeping chip sanctions from the Biden administration that choke off China's access to these advanced chips, Caitlin.
One other thing, though, that I didn't hear you mention was that recent trip that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi took to Taiwan. Obviously, it caused this uproar from China. They were so furious about that trip. Do you expect that that's something that the Chinese president is going to bring up with Biden?
Yeah, Caitlin, and shortly before her trip, remember, they had a phone call when Xi Jinping had warned Biden not to play with fire because those who play with fire will perish by it. Now, the topic of Taiwan is going to be a top priority for this meeting because this is the area where there's the greatest risk for a miscalculation that could tip over into actual conflict. Now, Taiwan, it is a self-governed, democratically ruled island, but it is central to the very core of the DNA of the Communist Party, that this idea, Taiwan is a breakaway province that must be reunified. So going into this meeting, a lot of tensions, high stakes, low expectations.
Yeah, I have a feeling we are going to hear the phrase strategic ambiguity leading up to this. Selena Wang, thanks so much for joining us.
I think you're right. Caitlin, let's talk more about this with CNN co-hosts Bianca Nobilo and Max Foster. I mean, that is like the U.S. line, right, on Taiwan. But I think it's notable. First time that Biden will sit down with Xi in person since Biden took office. And Biden himself has said no less than 4 times, clearly the U.S. will defend Taiwan if it were to be attacked by China. What are you looking for in this meeting?
Well, interested to hear from Caitlin, actually, what sort of pictures we expect to get out of this, because I think a lot of it, you know, as we were hearing there from Selena, not much substance expected. So what we're looking for is body language. I mean, these are the two guys that could potentially start World War III. There's a lot of tension between them. So is there any indication there that the tensions are being reduced, or at least a sense that they are learning from each other and trying to understand each other and get a greater sense of each other? And that's all going to come through the body language, isn't it?
I mean, you heard from Selena there, the aim from the Biden administration is to find a flaw in the relationship. So that's expectation management from the outset. Those aren't exactly high hopes for, you know, what we can expect from that summit. I think one of the main objectives that President Biden will have going into this as well is just to reintroduce the US and build trust with regional allies as well, because America has retreated from the region. If you think back in 1997 with the Asian financial crash, the US imposed quite strict financial measures on the region. Then we had under George W. Bush, because of the focus on the war on terror, Asia was almost completely neglected in terms of policy. Obama made all these overtures and promises to be more reassertive in the region, but they didn't really materialize. And then under President Trump, you had this quite specific, aggressive focus on Asia and trade. So the goal here is to bring America back into the vacuum that's being created, which China is moving into in the region.
What about a focus on, I mean, might this become a climate change summit, considering the issues that, you know, China and the U.S. are dealing with when it comes to climate change?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the COP, a lot of the language coming out of that is, you know, what's the point in any of this if we don't have China and the US, you know, backing it? They are the two big emitters of carbon dioxide in the world, and they're not talking about the issue, are they? So these are two leaders that can resolve so many of the world's problems, which is why it's such a crucial meeting and why everyone's tiptoeing around it, because they don't want the relationship to get any worse. And also, off the back of the midterms, obviously, Biden's slightly empowered, but it's nothing compared to Xi, who has got this third unprecedented term. He's got absolute control over his country. So he's empowered. How is he going to use that, and how's Biden going to respond to it?
Max,
Precisely. There is a parity there.
I'm sorry, Bianca.
I was just going to say, John, that there is not parity on that level, and there never will be between a US president and a Chinese president on that, in that aspect. But in terms of the other issues that they're going to be discussing, it's hard because there aren't any which automatically would be areas where there could be consensus between the two. There's obviously huge discrepancies on human rights, on democracy, on Taiwan, on tensions in the South China Sea. So there aren't very clear areas where some inroads could be made between these two superpowers.
Yeah, Max, I was just going to say as a follow-up, Bianca, I'm a little disappointed in you this morning.
Why?
Because he's wearing a tie. You let me down.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
What happened, Max?
It's chaos.
You can't see it because of the camera, but I am bringing the informality in my footwear, as you guys are all aware of.
Well,
so
I like to dress up on a Friday night, getting ready to go out, you see.
Yeah, you're going to hit the town.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, have a good weekend. Thank you so much.
Slippers, that's what she's talking about.
Indeed.
Slippers, by the way. Thanks, Bianca.
The top U.S. general estimates Russia and Ukraine both suffered on the battlefield. What he's now saying about the potential for peace talks.
Plus, a disturbing discovery at the construction site of former President Obama's presidential center. We are live in Chicago with the latest details.
You're looking at maybe 15, 20, 30 million refugees. Probably 40,000 Ukrainian innocent people, civilians, have been killed as collateral damage. You're looking at well over 100,000 Russian soldiers killed and wounded. Same thing probably on the Ukrainian side. A lot of human suffering. And there's one guy that can stop it, and his name is Vladimir Putin.
That staggering number coming from Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley. It is the highest estimate yet on how many Russian soldiers have been killed or injured. He says probably an equivalent number of Ukrainian soldiers. Obviously, so much of this devastation is being taken out on the Ukrainian people themselves. You have seen the damage to the infrastructure there. You have heard the stories of so many of these fighters, of the women and the children. CNN's Christiane Amanpour was in a small hub in Kyiv. It's already delivered $1 million worth of aid just for women who are fighting on the front line.
At a nondescript storefront in Kyiv, covered with plastic against prying eyes, a major war effort is underway. Boxes of kit reveal a first of its kind. Fatigues designed for a mother-to-be.
So was there never, Andre, anything for pregnant women before?
Never ever.
Now, how many pregnant women are fighting the Russians?
I'm not sure that a lot, but there are. Yeah.
Andre and Ksenia are married TV journalists in real life who now do this work. A female friend turned frontline sniper told them that she was pregnant and needed a new uniform. They're also sending female soldiers smaller boots, lighter Kevlar plates for their flak vests. On this day, Roxolana comes in for a new uniform. She's in an intelligence unit near the front and joined up in March totally unprepared. It's so valuable to have these people who understand that we are tired of wearing clothes that are 3 sizes too big, she tells me. We had no helmets, we had old flat jackets, we wore tracksuits and sneakers. Now we feel that we're humans. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense says there are more than 50,000 women under arms, more than 5,000 of them on the front line, amongst them Andrei's sister.
She received men's uniform, men's underwear, everything that designed for men.
Females also need customized sanitary, medical and humanitarian supplies. Ksenia and Andrei have sent out 3,000 of these care packages. They've produced 300 uniforms and plan for at least another 2,000, all winterized. And then there's this vital tool.
Oh my God, I have never seen that. A feminine urinary director for women of all ages. Well, basically they pee in that, right? If there's no toilet.
Not in, they pee like men.
Look at that. Oh my God, if only I'd known that in all the years I was in the field.
And as a parting gift, they throw in this book on resilience and courage amid battle and in captivity, which happened to Elena Panina 5 months ago after the fall of Mariupol. She is part of a canine border guard unit, and like so many of the port city's defenders, she had been hunkering down in the giant Azovstal steel plant. She was recently released as part of an all-female prisoner exchange with Russia. We meet at this pizza bar run by vets.
Were you prepared for life as a POW?
No, I was not, she says. And we discuss this a lot with the other women prisoners, that life hasn't trained us for such an ordeal. While in captivity, though, I said I'll continue my service and I have no plans to stop. Back at their private procurement center, Andrei says he wishes he could join his sister, father and brother-in-law all at the front. But a physical disability means that he's not eligible.
For a man, it's kind of hard to understand that you can't go there and your sister is there. So I'm trying to do my best here to help not only my family, but the whole army.
And the reviews from the battlefield are in. It's just amazing, says Anastasia. I'm happy as a child. The uniform is ideal, it looks great, and the fabric is very sturdy. Meantime, Roxolana's new boots are made for marching, all the way back to the front.
And CNN's Christiane Amanpour joins us now. That story is amazing, and I'm struck by how many of these women, they had no experience doing this, and now this is their new life on the front line.
Indeed, Caitlin, there are tens of thousands who've joined up. We understand from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, 5,000 women on the front line. It's quite a high proportion, compared with NATO in general. And in my conversation with the presidential couple, the president told me bravery has no gender. And right now, we're seeing movement in the Kherson region. The Russian Ministry of Defense says that they have left the city. There is a Ukrainian flag that has been raised. The Ukrainian military is not in the city, we don't believe, and the Ukrainian government is not confirming these Russian withdrawal public statements.
One thing I'm so struck by with this is that we haven't really heard Putin himself weigh in on these withdrawals. Why do you think that is?
Well, Caitlin, look, I don't know, but I think because he's always tried to project strength and success on the battlefield, Kherson is vital to the Russians. It's in that, you know, very, very strategic area. It's a big gateway, not just for their lines of supply, but also to the Black Sea, which is crucial if they want to choke this country off and control that part. I mean, the Black Sea is the export opening, the window for Ukraine. And so that's very important. Plus, it's obviously close to Russia. But also, you know, Putin's not going to the G20. That starts after the weekend in Indonesia. He won't be seeing President Biden or his friend, you know, the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Why is that? Maybe he doesn't want to have any awkward conversations about what appear to be significant battlefield losses.
Yeah, there were big questions about whether or not President Biden should go. President Putin was going to be there. Obviously, he won't. Christian, thanks for that update, and we'll stick with you on what's happening with those withdrawals. Meanwhile, there's been an exciting discovery beneath an Egyptian temple, a tunnel that might lead to the lost tomb of Cleopatra.
This is a fascinating story. It's a surprising discovery this morning in Egypt. An ancient tunnel found beneath the temple that could now lead to Cleopatra's tomb. Wow, a research team found the almost mile-long tunnel 40 feet underground. Scott McLean on the case for us from London. Good morning. What happened?
Hey, Don. Yeah, so this Dominican archaeologist named Kathleen Martinez has been searching for Cleopatra's tomb for some 15 years now based on a theory. The theory is this, stay with me, is that Cleopatra would be buried at this temple site about 30 miles west of Alexandria because of its association with the ancient Egyptian goddess Isis, and because Cleopatra was supposed to be the human incarnation of Isis when she ruled more than 2,000 years ago. So not exactly a rock-solid theory, but they've been digging it up now for more than a decade. They've found coins bearing her image. They found gold pieces, busts, you name it. They found the entrance to this tunnel using ground-penetrating radar, and when they got inside of it, they realized that it is massive. It's more than 3/4 of a mile long. It's 40 feet underground, and it actually goes under, if you can believe it, a 10-lane highway toward the Mediterranean. So the further that you go down this tunnel, the more it becomes submerged with water, to the point that at the end of it, well, you actually need scuba gear to get there. The end of it, though, has collapsed, and so there's no way to get beyond that. The archaeologists now have the task of digging through 2,000 years of sediment to find out if the tomb is actually there, Don.
I told you, Scott's on the case. Scott, thank you very much. We appreciate it. So following the money, we are tracking how much the GOP spent on states where they woefully underperformed.
And the waiting game continues. Sorry to tell you, but we still don't know the balance of power in Congress. How the key races are trending. We'll have that next.